I believe we are live.
Great. So why don't we get started? Welcome everybody to the March Queens Community Board 2 full board meeting. Good to see everyone. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think Anatol is going to share his screen with a flag. And everybody can go
Nice.
off. Yes, it's very nice. Ready? Let's go.
Pledge allegiance
To the
Hey,
flag.
Danielle.
Oh, sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of
United
America
States of America
and to the republic
for
which stands
one
one
nation,
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very nice. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so it's good to be with y'all. We're going to get right started with comments from any attending public officials. And I don't think I see any actual public officials, but I do see some representatives. So maybe we'll start there. I'm going to start with, so I'm just going to ask if you can try to keep your remarks to 2 minutes. And for board members, when you're asking questions, please keep them about the community and please try to keep them to 2 questions. And I see Evelyn Lee from Grace Meng's office here. So
yes, Danielle, I'm here.
Welcome.
Hi again. Hi everyone. Just 2 quick announcements. So I definitely want to keep it short within 2 minutes. One is I don't think I have that. I said that last month because we released this survey right after the meeting. So we actually released last month a call to action survey to help gather ideas on how constituents would like to see infrastructure dollars from the infrastructure framework bill spent in the district. So if you have not, I mean, like, you have not heard about this survey or have not got this survey, definitely reach out to me. We definitely want your ideas. And then second, we are gonna have another passporting event in on March 19, which is a Sunday, in Jackson Heights Post Office, which is very much closer to CB2 districts. I'm excited because Jackson Heights, Amherst, and Woodside is actually like the #2 area we got the most passport requests from. So we are very excited. We definitely think people in the district would be will be benefiting from that. So we are still working on the Bangla version of the flyers. So after everything is done, I'm gonna send out to CB2 office. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Evelyn, is the survey just for constituents of Representative Meng's district or for anybody? Because I know
probably just for, I mean, we are releasing it to our Congress 6th district. But if you have any ideas, definitely reach out to us as well. Yeah, but we still have we're overlapping, so we are welcoming any ideas, especially CB2 have a lot of infrastructure things going on. So yeah, let me know.
Did anybody on the board have any questions? Okay. Thank you, Evelyn. I'll move to Farah from Councilmember Wan's office. Hi, Farah.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Apologies, I'm in the middle of transit right now, but I'm not driving. I'm a passenger. Just wanted to give that disclaimer. Thank you for having us tonight. I have a few updates. One is we have our CUNY Citizenship Now immigration event. That is this Saturday from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. I believe there are a few appointments left. I'll share the flyer in the chat once I get home. And this is for anybody who is looking to apply for citizenship. So I believe there's already over 100 appointments. There's several immigration lawyers that will be there that day. And it's at the CUNY Law School, so in Court Square. So that's the first big thing. We'll also be hosting a tax webinar for small businesses and for property owners. That's on March 15th with a company capital. And we have to send out an updated flyer and update it, but it's in conjunction with the Queens Chamber of Commerce, the LIC bid, and Sunnyside Shines. And well, we're also, if anybody is in need of individual tax preparation help, we have been sending constituents to Woodside on the Move, who's been gracious enough to take on our constituents as well as Urban Upbound. I also wanted to provide a few legislative updates. So the council member today, she was at a rally with her council colleagues, introduced for intro of 941 for free universal childcare for all New Yorkers. Yesterday, there was also an announcement for Welcome NYC. This is a $2.2 million initiative that will fund organizations that provide critical wraparound services to immigrant New Yorkers. And yeah, that's about it for legislative updates. And then for participatory budgeting, we are currently underway to prep for Get Out the Vote Week. That is going to be March 25th to April 2nd. Once we have all that information, we'll send it to y'all. And we'll be marching with everybody on this upcoming Sunday at St. Pat's for All. So we're looking forward to that. And that's it for now.
Great, thank you. We are, I think we're all looking forward to Sunday. I see that Dr. Roz has a question.
Hi, yeah, I'm just curious what the council member's position is on the outdoor dining and whether it should be, as I hope, year round.
So I have to actually touch base with Isaac, our legislative director, on that. I do know that she is supportive of outdoor dining. I just need to find out the more details about it.
Cool.
Does that help?
Well, let us know, tweet it out, do something.
Yeah,
we'll let you know. I know that there's just, I think as it comes up, that's when we are able to provide updates. Because on the council side, things tend to be sometimes in limbo.
Yeah, my sense is that this is very much in play though right now. And so I'd like to see her be more vocal in supporting it.
I'll definitely pass that message on. And also just thank the council member for the town hall on the seawalls, and we're going to be talking about that a lot tonight. So it was very appreciated that she helped organize that town hall.
And of course, anything, if there's anything that you all are interested in seeing as a town hall or community event, please feel free to reach out to our office.
Okay. Yep. We will likely do that, and we can maybe jointly host if that helps. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to Javier from the DA's office. Are you Javier? Okay, well, maybe we'll come back and we'll go to Mafuzal from Senator Gonzalez's office.
Hi, everyone. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Some legislative news. The New York State Senate Internet and Technology Committee advanced the Secure Our Data Act, which proposed S5007, was sponsored by Committee Chair Senator Christine Gonzalez. The legislation will prepare and protect New York State entities against ransomware attacks by requiring the Office of Information and Technology Services to develop data protection standards for state agencies, requiring state entities to engage in regular vulnerability testing of its information systems, requiring each state entity to create an inventory of the information systems, and requiring each state entity to develop an incident response plan for ransomware and other malware attacks. Just over a week ago, Senator Gonzalez joined her colleagues in voting to pass the Build Public Renewables Act. The legislation will transform the energy sector in New York by allowing the New York Power Authority to own and build new energy generating projects, which they cannot currently do. The BPRA requires NYPA to be the sole electricity provider for all state and municipal buildings, and mandates that NYPA provide 100% renewable energy by 2030. The senator is away in Albany to continue to fight for the needs of state Senate District 59 during the month's budgeting negotiations. Our office also participated in the Queen's Budget Forum held on February 22nd, where we heard budget requests directly from the community. Locally, Senator Gonzalez continues to call for safer streets for our pedestrians and cyclists following the dual tragedies of Tammy Chu Chi Kao and Doma Nadun. The loss of these two lives, along with too many others, are a result of policy failure. Traffic violence is the outcome of poorly designed streets and is a solvable problem. Our office was also present in Borough President Donovan Richards' Borough Hall on your block, NYCHA Town Hall on February 22nd, where we were able to hear the concerns of NYCHA residents. Our office is always here to assist with any issues residents may be having, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'll once again provide my email address in the chat so that you can check this. That's it for us.
Thank you. Thank you for participating in the budget forum. I submitted about 7 pages of testimony, so thank you. I see that Maury has a question.
Yes, hi. Thank you for coming and thanks for supporting that technology law. Really great to hear that. One thing I just wanted to put on your radar and ask you about also is for the past few sessions, Senator Kevin Thomas has introduced the New York Privacy Act, which last February 2022, it passed the Consumer Protection Committee, but I haven't seen it introduced again this year. And I just wanted to put it on your radar in case it is introduced. I know there are a lot of people in the community, and I'm one of them, that think this is a really strong law. It would put us on par with California and Europe. Actually, it beats, and a lot of people think that it's better than California's privacy protection. I don't like to use the word privacy, I use data rights, but it's a really strong, bold bill. You probably already know about it, but I would love to put it on your radar and Senator's radar.
The New York Privacy Act. Right?
Yeah, when it was Senate Bill 6701A in 2022, but it hasn't been introduced yet this year, I don't think.
Thank you for that. I'm definitely going to find that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mafuzal. We'll move to Victoria from AM Raghu's office.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just a couple of announcements. Reminder to those receiving the senior citizen home exemption and the veterans and disabled homeowners counterparts, the deadline to refile or file an initial application is March 15th. If you have questions about your eligibility or your renewal application, you can call our office and set up an appointment so that we can go through the application with you. Similarly, if you are interested in applying for SCREE or DREE, the senior citizen rent increase exemption, there's no deadline on that, but if that's something that you're interested in, you can call our office and make an appointment so that we can go through that with you. Coming up events, March 25th will be our Women of Distinction celebration for Women's History Month, and that will be hosted at the Queens Public Library in Elmhurst. Our staff will send over the invitation details to CB2. We also have a series of mobile office hours coming up, and we'll send over the schedule so that those in the Woodside area can participate in our mobile office hours. And I believe that's all the updates on my end. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay. Oh, yes, Carisha. You're muted.
Sorry, yeah, I don't know. Technology is slow today. Hey, Victoria, I was wondering if there was going to be any like info session or information that would be shared out for when groups can request information about funding. I don't know if assembly people have discretionary funds, but I know there's some sort of funding that's available that maybe starts.
The assembly usually does have discretionary funding. However, the amount that is provided, we don't know, and we won't know until spring. if there is a community group or a nonprofit organization that's interested in discussing discretionary funds, they can call our office and set up a meeting to meet with me or the member. And then the other avenue for funding would be to submit a budget request in the One House budget. That timeline is pretty much up as the houses are entering budget negotiations. But again, we could talk, if there's a specific nonprofit or group that has questions, we can talk offline, and I can go more in depth about all that information.
Okay, thanks so much.
Sheila?
Yes, hi, everyone. Sheila Lewandowski. Sorry, my automatic response where it goes to so many Zoom calls. A question for actually all representatives from Assembly Person's office and also Senate offices is my understanding right now is NISCA, which would be another avenue for arts groups to seek funding, is facing an 80% cut over last year. And so I would really like to hear from the Assembly and Senate representatives here if arts and cultural activities and funding for arts and culture in these districts as well as the state is a priority. It affects education, it affects mental health. So can I please hear from our representatives from Senator Gonzalez, Assembly Member Ardila, and any other Senate and Assembly people here?
Yeah, so I'll just take a crack at it first. So of course, I think funding for the arts and culture is incredibly important, especially for the communities of Western Queens. It's such a vibrant area. So many cultures are represented, and it's really important that community-based organizations have funding to continue to represent and reiterate that culture and educate. I haven't seen, or I'm not really familiar with this particular avenue of funding. And so I'd like to look at a little bit more in the governor's proposal. But if it's a matter of retaining that funding, or if it's already been submitted into the One House budget, then Assemblyman Raga would, our office would strongly support maintaining funding for arts and culture.
Well, to clarify for Senator Gonzalez's office and for Assembly Member Raga's office, and I don't know if other folks are here, Assembly Member O'Donnell as well as Senator Serrano have letters asking for the continuation of the funding that was in the budget last year, which is a $40 million base and a $40 million add. We are still in the runway from the pandemic, and arts and cultural organizations have not just served for cultural and arts and education and other activities. They've also served as places for distribution, and still are, of masks and other PPE, and in some cases food distribution. And NISCA is a place that smaller organizations especially get funding, and individual artists get funding. It is actually more important to the local organizations even than some of the larger organizations. And so it's not about keeping it level to last year, but it's about recognizing you're cutting jobs and you're cutting services that are helping this city and this state to not only recover, but have an economically, mentally, et cetera. So I appreciate you saying, but it's not just about keeping it at 40. It's about making sure we don't slip back. And the other thing is basically 40 million is the equivalent of what we were at about 30 years ago. So I thank you.
No, thank you.
Sorry, Kat, sorry.
Thank you. I just want to second Sheila on this. I wanted to also just really point out and really hammer home the economic impact of the arts. New York State contributes 8% of the federal budget in taxes and to the federal budget, right? The 2% of that, like not 2% of the 8%, but like 2%, like a quarter of New York State's contribution to the federal budget is the New York City arts and culture sector. And by not funding and not fighting as hard as we can to keep this funding here for these small businesses and for these groups and these artists, like it was literally going to reduce the economic output and therefore the tax base for the federal government. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Sure.
So it's Badran. So just want to talk about the funding. I don't know if you know, I work from the nonprofit world. We just had all these one agency shut down after 150 years, Shelter Arm. So how can we letting that happen with the city? Because when I see it, it's we have the budgets, but the city is not. I know there was a meeting about 2 weeks ago where I think our councilwoman was there on certain fundings, DYCD, there's HASA, there's HRA, there's one that shut down. And beside all the arts, there's a huge, the program that shut down is for the youths, and it had a huge program with the juvenile delinquents. And that had a great program. So I'm a little bit nervous because we need these nonprofits. Because that closed after 150 years. I think, Sheila, you know who I'm talking about. I see you nodding. Shelter Arms, which was really sad. It was a great project. So how as a community, how is our city, state, how we're fighting for these funds and to keep these nonprofit running, not only for especially the after school programs or cut downs, like what can we do as community members? What can we do as state senate, write about them? Because it was really sad, the one that shut down, because I actually manage a lot of these funds. So it just really sad. And how is our state, our fighting for these things too? Because also there's another problem. The city is not giving them funding. They shut down because the city couldn't give them the funding because they couldn't sign the contracts fast enough. And so many people lost their jobs.
Anyone want to speak to that?
Sorry, I maybe went out of my board, but I know.
Okay, so
yeah.
That. Oh, wait, sorry. You weren't talking to me. You were talking to the elected.
I didn't know, so I didn't know if maybe you could answer, like, I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about.
Maybe yeah, I mean, this is elected, elected official or public, or their representatives question time. So maybe the representatives who are here can take that back to their elected and come back with an answer to us. Okay. Okay, I am gonna move us along because we have a tight agenda tonight. I think Monica Guzman is here from Sunnyside Community Services.
Hi. Thank you, Danielle.
Hi.
Thanks for the opportunity. And I can echo some of what was said. So right now, Sunnyside Community Services is testifying at hearings, making sure that we're meeting with all of the assembly members, all the state representatives, city council, to advocate for these issues, to advocate for more funding, and to advocate for cost of living adjustments for staff, which salaries really do need to increase if we want to keep our staff. Related to that, I wanted to let people know that there are job openings at Sunnyside Community Services, a range of opportunities from accountant to positions in our youth department. Social workers are needed in adult services. I'm looking for a grant writer. So if people are looking for opportunities to sort of work in their own backyard, they should definitely visit our website. Announcement March 10th is the deadline to apply for pre-K. So if there are families looking to send their 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds, they should go to the New York City Department of Education website. And if they're interested in Sunnyside Community Services, we have a program for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Please reach out to us. We're setting up tours for families right now, and be sure to include us, list us in the application. We're always looking for volunteers. I know we've made a pitch a couple of times, but we are still struggling to get volunteers back to the same levels, pre-pandemic, but all of our programs are back to in-person. So if anybody wants to come help out in the senior center, or even help out in administrative projects, or pay a friendly visit to a homebound senior, again, reach out to us. And I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other representatives or anyone here. Debbie, Anatole, am I missing someone? Anyone?
No, I
Okay.
think we've gotten everybody.
Great. And with that, we're going to move to, we're actually going to have the guest speaker from the Department of Sanitation go before public comment tonight. Is that person here, Debbie?
I'm here, Danielle. How are
Oh,
you?
awesome. Hi, sorry. I see you. Hi, welcome.
Yes.
Thank you very much for having me.
Joe, do you need sharing privileges?
Yes, just for the PowerPoint I was going to share. Thank you.
Hey, hang on one second, give 1 minute, moment, and I will give you privileges.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, you have privileges.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Just going to open this up. Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Joe Ottavinelli. I'm with the Department of Sanitation's Community Affairs Bureau, and I'm here tonight on the call to just discuss briefly about the upcoming set-out time changes that are going to be taking effect on April 1st. So as everybody knows, the current set-out time is actually the earliest of any major city in the U.S., and that's after 4 p.m. So the ultimate emphasis here is that the new rule will reduce the time trash obstructs sidewalks, making it clear the streets cleaner, and in turn reducing the amount of rodents that trash on the sitting idle on the sidewalk attracts. There's two areas I wanted to speak to tonight: the set out time changes for both residents and commercial establishments. For residents, they'll have two options to set out their trash recycling and curbside composting. So any residents that have place their trash recycling and curbside composting out in a container of 55 gallons or less with a secure lid, that can be done so after 6 p.m. And any residents that place their trash or recyclables or compost out in bags can do so after 8 p.m. And we just asked that to ensure all collection, that everything be placed out by midnight. For buildings with 9 or more units, there is we do for buildings more units, they can opt in annually for set out times between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m.
Oh, I think Joe froze. Joe, can you hear us?
Joe?
Bueller.
Joe, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. You froze. Joe, you back?
Oh.
Okay, he dropped off.
Okay, so why don't we move to public comment and then we can come back to Joe if he can get back on.
It's fine.
So Anatole, you have the public comment list?
Yep. William Kregler first.
I don't see him, so why don't we see if Theodora Scarrato
I think
is
I
here?
did see her.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, so you have 2 minutes to make public comment.
Thank you so much. I'm Theodora Scarrato, Executive Director of Environmental Health Trust. We are a scientific think tank focused on environmental health issues with a focus on wireless radiation. And I'm here to talk about the 5G poles. So our scientists, I should say, our work on everything from environmental causes of breast cancer to cancer and cell phone radiation. And now we're actually focused on wildlife and wireless as well. You can go to ehtrust.org to learn more. But what I wanted to say is that what the city is stating is that the federal law says that it's okay that we're doing what we're doing. However, the federal laws around this issue are from 1996. They're based on science from many years earlier. And we ended up suing the federal government a few years ago because they had not looked at all of the recent science. The second highest court in the land, the U.S. Appeals Court, D.C. Circuit, determined a favorable ruling in our case and ruled that the FCC had ignored substantial evidence on the record related to children's unique vulnerability, long-term exposure, impacts to wildlife, and as well as the way that they test and measure the radiation. And the court ordered the FCC to address these issues, long-term exposure, children's vulnerability, and the FCC now a year and a half later has not responded. I have been writing the city requesting repeatedly, asking for their RF compliance reports, and they have not produced them. I know that FOIAs have been done by other people in the community as well, but I'm going to be sending information to you so you have more about our court case as well as about these questions. There's so many transparency issues in New York City that it's quite astounding, actually. I'm in Washington, D.C., and here where I live, I can actually get all of this information quite immediately. I'm not able to even answer questions that people ask me because I don't have the information from the city about what kinds of antennas, modulations, pulsations, et cetera, that are coming out of the jumbo 5G poles or will be coming out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Theodora. And I know that we are, I believe, Anatole, we're going to have you or someone else who you were with come to the tech committee next month to speak with us about this in more detail.
Great. Thank you.
And Joe is back, but before we go to Joe, I just want to make sure that William Kregler is not here. Okay, we're going to go back to Joe.
Sorry about that, everybody. I had some connectivity issues on my end. Apologize. So I'll get back to sharing that for everybody. Okay, so moving on to businesses. For businesses that place their trash at that place their waste at the curb, they have two options for their set out. If they're placing it out in a container, they are able to do so after within an hour of closing. And like residential establishments can have the opportunity to place out any waste recycling or composting after 8 p.m. This particular set out time change does not apply to businesses that have waste collected from a loading dock. And we also just want to ask any businesses that do place their trash or their recyclables or compost out in containers to have those containers removed from the curb by the time businesses reopen. We are currently conducting outreach to both residents and businesses as I'm here tonight speaking to the community boards, sending out mailers to both to residents, property managers, and businesses, making calls to 10 plus units with janitorial staff, as well as implementing paid media campaigns through a variety of platforms to promote the upcoming change. And if there's any particular questions beyond the call, of course, here's our bureau information, and I will leave my personal information in the chat. Thank you. And if there's any questions now, I'd be happy to open them up.
Yeah, we do have some questions. Thank you. We'll start with Roz.
Yeah, I have, I think, a very quick question. You showed in your PowerPoint these large 55-gallon containers. And if I recall correctly, I thought you were limited to something like 40 or for recyclables and so on. Can we use the larger containers?
Yes, based on our updated guidelines, residents are eligible to use containers of that size, within that gallon range.
Yeah, that actually makes good sense too, because it means you're more likely to get the lid on tight and rather than trying to stuff everything in. Thank you.
Of course.
Sheila?
Thank you, Sheila Lewandowski here. So Joe, my question, I'm going to keep my questions only to what you're presenting on as the kind of the schedule. But one of the things that's been presented with this change is the fee schedule, where it's per violation, $50, $100, et cetera. And thinking in terms of equity, I find it's almost like nothing if you're talking about a large building of 500, 600 units getting a $50 fine or $100 fine. Whereas you're talking about a 2-family home or 4-family home, that might actually mean something. So have you considered making it per unit or having a graded scale so that the larger buildings, who should actually have mandatory composting anyway, are encouraged to meet these rules as opposed to deciding whether they're going to pay staff, which is going to cost them more than $50 or $100.
Yes, so that particular concern, Sheila, I'd have to bring back to see where we are internally on that particular front. I definitely would be happy to take your information down and try to circle back with you as soon as possible as we
We should
kind of
circle back
evaluate.
through the community board office and through our chair, because to me, this is not just a district-wide issue, but this would be a citywide issue. And if this administration is serious about equity and about supporting these large developments, then they should be held to accountable.
Of course, I'll be in touch with the committee on that.
Thanks, Sheila. Kenny?
Hi, I have a short question as well. What is a tight-fitting lid? In other words, in the image you show the type where it's part and parcel of the container. I have the type that is separate, but it does snap on tight. Is that?
Yes, anything like the emphasis there is that there's inability for any road like in the same emphasis of what we speak about with rat resistant bins. Anything that prevents any outside elements going into the container. That's the type of bins we are alluding to in that front.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kenny. Steve?
Yes, I know that we're going to be required to put out our trash later, assuming that sanitation does not come to pick it up in the morning. How long can we leave it out without getting fined?
So it's the collection the collection parameters stay the same, Stephen. So if any collection is supposed to stay out within the duration of your whole collection day, and if there's anything not picked up and after your scheduled collection day, we encourage constituents to reach out through 311 to generate a missed collection number, and then from there we can service accordingly. But at least within the duration of your entirety of your designated collection day.
The reason I'm asking, Joe, is because it happened to me once fairly recently, and I called 311, and they do not connect you with sanitation. They simply take the report. And when I asked them, well, do I take my garbage back in or do I leave it out? They really had no idea. So perhaps you can tell us what we're supposed to do in the future.
Yes. So as I was just alluding to, you want to generate a 301 number of a missed collection, and that'll basically hedge against any particular violation being issued for the items sitting out curbside ahead of longer than your scheduled collection day. And on top of that, I will also provide my information in the direct line to our customer service unit to assist in a further capacity for any miscollection related matters or any other sanitation related matters for further assistance.
That'd be great. I'm sure the board can distribute that to the community because it's not just me, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Steve. Laura?
Yes, thanks. So in Hell's Kitchen, there's currently a pilot for on-street trash containers to address the rat issues and pedestrian obstructions. Is this going to expand at all?
Yes, as of now, Laura, I'm only aware of the pilot program being present in the city and at my particular discretion, but I can definitely follow up to see where we are in terms of expansion across other boroughs in the city and follow up with the board on that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Joe. I have one question, but it's not exactly related. What is the date when composting starts again?
Oh, excellent question. So it will be resuming in Queens the week of March 27th. And then just one other point that we want to make emphasis to all the residents of Queens. After the expansion of the program in October, as a thank you to everybody for their support and participation for the program, we will be hosting a variety of compost givebacks across the borough, and those dates are to be soon to be followed with for everybody to who's interested to obtain a bag going forward.
Great, that's great news. I think everyone on CB2 is very excited about that.
Yes, and just one other point of emphasis, Danielle, just because with the pause in the program during the winter months, we will actually even be proceeding now going forward without any pause in the program, so it'll be straight through going forward as well now.
Yay!
Yeah.
Great news. I think Sheila has one more question.
I have a follow-up since we went outside of the initial, and it relates to composting also.
Yes.
This was brought up at a prior meeting can we get in our district some of those community composting bins? Because right now they exist in Queensbridge and in Ravenswood and up in Astoria. But you know what I'm talking about, the metal ones because there are buildings that still don't do composting, and so people want places to bring their composting.
I can bring that
Thank
back.
you, smart bins there.
Yeah, I can bring that back, Sheila, to see what can be done on our end. If you just have a particular, locations at all, if you want to just send them
How
to
about
me.
every 4 blocks?
Okay. All right, so I'll take that down, and if there's, we'll bring it back and see what we can do on our end. Okay.
Thank you.
Of course.
We're strong. We appreciate composting in this area a lot. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming and talking with us tonight.
Thank you very much, and have a great night, everybody.
You too. So we actually have some reps from some elected official offices who were having some technical difficulties who have joined us now. So we're going to go back and talk with them, starting with Mercedes from Senator Gianaris's office. Mercedes.
Hi, everyone. I am so sorry if you just see darkness for a minute. I'm actually coming in. I'm in an Uber, so forgive me if I'm kind of going in and out. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak again tonight. I'm Mercedes Jennings. I'm community liaison for Senator Mike Gianaris. I apologize for my lateness tonight. I was actually with the senator tonight at a vigil for Dolma Naham. If everyone knows, she was the 7-year-old that was struck by the SUV on the corner of 45th Street and Newtown Road. The senator has been diligently, along with myself, working to make sure that we get a stoplight there. We've been contacting DOT so much every single day. They're probably tired of us calling, but we will keep doing that until that family gets the justice they deserve. So we were there this evening. In addition to that, the senator is still working on bills to pass the antitrust fund. So to help with small businesses in our community. So hopefully that definitely gets passed this Senate session. And just working really hard to make sure that the green light bill passes again, because that also helps and prevents a lot of accidents with youth in our community. So just again, know that I put my information in the chat, see our office as a resource. And again, CB2, thank you so much for allowing me to speak late in the meeting. I do appreciate it greatly. Take care.
No, we do have one question from Ross.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Sorry. Go ahead.
I really appreciate the tragedy of the little girl's death and so on. My comment is I would not be as specific about traffic light there. Let the engineers of DOT figure it out. They need serious traffic calming, rearranging that. I know they put in some immediate things. We were just over there. They repainted the striping and so on,
right,
and completed it. But we have on 52nd Street, they put a stoplight in at the head of our block, one that I live on. And, I see cars racing up the block to make the light. So I'm not completely sure that stoplights are the panacea, but let the traffic engineers do it. Okay, just a thought.
I understand where you're coming from, Rosamond, but the only reason why the senator was pushing for the stoplight is because the family has really been pushing for it, has been working with our office closely. And in addition, the way that the incident actually happened, in the SUV not seeing the young girl, and the way that the structure of it has been, many have already assessed for the traffic light. However, and that's why the push has been for that, because the family has really advocated for that piece.
I appreciate reaching out and helping the family. Absolutely. My heart totally goes out. But things like daylighting could help. And some areas of enforcement, I gather that the driver was not even a licensed driver. Got to learn.
Right. Cable either. So he's trying to work on all angles. And thank you so much. I really appreciate your support and input as well. Thank you. Any other questions?
I don't see any, but thank you, Mercedes. And I think we all know how to reach out if we need to, so we will.
Thank you. Of course.
And then we also have Melissa from Assemblymember Ardia's office here. Melissa? I know that Melissa was having some technical difficulties, so maybe she is not here.
She's here. She unmuted, but she's not talking.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're gonna have to move on, but if we figure it out, we will. And I do want to apologize. There's a lot of noise in my apartment hallway tonight because someone moved out and now someone's moving in. So I just apologize for the noise. Okay, we are going to move to a presentation from John Sanchez, the Executive Director of the 5-Borough Housing Movement. John came and spoke to the Land Use and Housing Committee last month, and we asked him to come to speak to the full board. And I see that John is now co-host and will probably share his screen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of Community Board 2. As way of background, I used to be a district manager for Bronx Community Board 6 for 5 years, so I appreciate all of the hard work that you do and the service that you provide to our city. Tonight, I'm going to discuss a proposal that we're advocating for on the state level to allow for affordable housing through office conversions. So the 5-Borough Housing Movement is a coalition across the 5 boroughs of nonprofits, business groups, civics groups. We have a 3-member board, the Building Congress, former Assembly Member Marcos Crespo, and former Queens Deputy Borough President Melva Miller. To provide some context, we all understand New York and New York City is in a housing crisis, but we're also getting lapped by other cities in the South, whether it be Houston, Dallas, Miami, Atlanta. Also, we're seeing that not every community board is doing its fair share. 10 community boards account for nearly half of the housing that's been built in the last 10 years. And if you look at this chart, Queens Community Board 2 is in the top 10. Ideally, we have a situation where this pie chart was evenly distributed across the 59 community boards, instead of leaning on and relying on 10 community boards to carry the responsibility of producing housing. This is even more pronounced when it comes to affordable housing construction. My neighborhood in the Bronx is in the dark red. That's where thousands of units of affordable housing have been built since 2014. But there are other parts of this city in dark blue that have not been keeping up with affordable housing production. And we want to make sure that every neighborhood is doing its fair share of not only housing construction, but especially affordable housing construction. So here's what we're advocating for. We want to change some outdated state laws that prevent offices from converting to residential if they so choose. We want to allow the city to determine where FAR should be allowed instead of the state deciding what the cap should be. And we want to make sure if there's office conversions, that there's affordable housing as a component of that. This all sprung out of the panel convened by the mayor and the governor about looking at what does a new New York look like? How can we reimagine business districts where people aren't going into the office 5 days a week? The city of New York also released a study about last month discussing how feasible it is for office conversions to occur. And in fact, the city council held a hearing on this matter on Tuesday. The city council also has a resolution calling for the state to create a program to allow for office conversions. Right now, there's really 3 types of buildings that are likely to convert to residential. And these are some visuals. Type 1, these are buildings that kind of look like apartments already. They have operable windows. They tend to be a little shorter and they have working windows. Type 2 and type 3, these are offices that you're more likely to see if you're in Times Square or Grand Central. They don't have working windows. They have bigger floor plates. They're harder to convert. But we think a combination of all of these would consider converting if given the option. Right now, the state law is very convoluted. It allows flexibility from conversion if the buildings built before 1961, as you can see here on the chart. Buildings built between 1961 and 1977 can only convert if they're in Lower Manhattan, south of Murray Street. And buildings built after 1977 can't convert to residential, even if the building's entirely empty right now. What we're advocating for, and what the city's advocating for, is to have a uniform threshold where buildings built before 1990 have the option to convert. Not a mandate, just an option. The other thing that we're advocating for is we want the city to determine where an FAR above 12 makes sense. This is another law from 1961, which limits how much housing can be built. For context, the areas that this would most likely impact are Manhattan south of 96th Street, a little bit of Long Island City, and a little bit of downtown Brooklyn. The important thing to know is that the state lifting the cap doesn't result in any construction. It just allows the city to determine if a rezoning is necessary and more density is needed. But the city still has review over this. It would still go through the ULURP process, the community board process. This just allows the city to make the decision rather than having it decided by Albany. For those that, quick primer on FAR, it's the floor area ratio. It's the square footage of all the floors in a building divided by the square footage of a building lot. And it's important to know that FAR isn't a height cap. It's really a cap on the amount of apartments that can be on each floor. If you look at these examples, you have a building that's 1 story and 4 stories. In the second example, the building's 2 stories and 8 stories. All of these buildings still have the same FAR, they just cover a different percentage of the lot. So it can result in buildings that are short and wide or tall and skinny. These are more visual examples of how FAR can look differently. Again, you can see the short and wide building. You can see some buildings that are split that look a little taller. It's really about density and not the height. We think that 20,000 units could be created through office conversions. And we have a great example of the state and city doing a similar program. From 1995 to 2006, the state and city had the program called 421G. This was intended to revitalize Lower Manhattan. And it produced around 13,000 units, 9,600 rentals, 3,000 condos. The big difference is that this program only had market rate development. There was no tax incentive for affordability. We want to see a tax incentive for affordability so we don't continue to get nothing but market rate through these conversions. We think there's ancillary benefits as well to allowing housing in commercial areas. It'll help with MTA ridership, which still hasn't recovered since the pandemic. We think business and restaurants can be supported with more people are living in commercial areas. And of course, people from across the 5 boroughs would be able to work on the construction jobs that are created through these conversions. In terms of our coalition partners, the Queens Chamber of Commerce is supportive. The Greater Jamaica Development Corporation is supportive. Several community boards are giving us letters of support. Even environmental groups such as the New York League of Conservation voters are supportive because conversions are less carbon intensive than brand new construction because you're reusing the concrete and steel rather than manufacturing it from scratch. With that, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions from the board.
Sorry,
And yes, I will share
see
the slide
Sheila
deck
has a
with,
question.
I will share the
Yes.
slide deck with the district manager.
Thank you.
Hi, John. Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. So when I hear people say New York City has a housing crisis, one of the things I never seem to be able to get, and I'm going to ask you if you have this information, is the housing that currently exists or the housing that has been recently created, including the so-called affordable housing. Do you have the information as to what exists in income bands, not just based on how affordability is currently defined, but in income bands? Because the housing crisis is in the affordability side and not necessarily in the luxury side. And yet it's still being defined loosely by a percentage of an area median income, which like in 11101, 11109 is a very high income. So that's one question. I'm going to throw out a whole bunch and see how many you get through. Have you considered also as part of this, a live work space for artisans and artists? Because there are a number of buildings that also we could be incorporating live workspaces, which the city could use to keep some of its artisans, which is really the current manufacturing in the city. Are you, and the devil's always in the details, just converting the spaces, or what are the parameters for livable spaces? Because much of what is being built now, especially in the so-called affordable units, is barely livable. And we're not even keeping the checklist for livable communities as far as the ratio of open green space and shared community amenities, not gated community amenities. And so you mentioned the three places you think the most conversions could be more readily available. And I'm guessing that's where the majority of the 20,000 units would be, happen to be in two of the places that are in the top 10% of places that have had units built that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, where you said Long Island City was one of the places in the top 10 for having new units of housing and new affordable housing. So why is it those three, the three that you mentioned, downtown Brooklyn, Long Island City, are places that are primed to convert commercial real estate when we're already meeting much of the housing market that isn't being met in many of the other, when you talked about equitably distributing it throughout the city? And so what is the distribution of the 20,000 units that you were saying can be done readily? So these are some of my questions. And so can you answer some of those? And then I will let someone else go.
Yes, in terms of the distribution of where the office conversions are likely to happen, 80% of all the office stock in New York City is in Manhattan, south of 96th Street. That's where we expect most of the conversions to happen. In terms of stats of affordability.
So where does that, so south of 96th Street, where does that sit as far as when you were talking at the beginning of your presentation? When
So
you're
the
talking
chart
about
that I
equitable
showed-
distribution of housing throughout the city in that map.
Yes, the chart that I showed earlier was talking about the top 10 community boards for total housing production.
Yep.
When it comes to office stock, 80% of the office stock is in lower
I'm
Manhattan.
talking about residential. You were saying how it's not a fair distribution in the city of what neighborhoods are taking on new housing, including new affordable housing, when you were talking about a housing crisis.
Yes,
That was the beginning of the presentation.
yes,
So what, south of 96th Street, where does it sit on that map?
sure, I'll bring it up again.
And then Long Island City, of
So
course.
this map, if you see, the blue is where little affordable housing has been built. And you see council districts 2, 4, and 5, which are south of 96th Street on the east side.
But so why is this community considered one of the top three when we are one of the highest for having already built housing?
So I think you're confusing two things. This chart shows the number of total units approved by community boards. The second chart is talking about exclusively affordable housing.
Yes, I don't think I'm confusing this. At the end of your presentation, you mentioned that this community board and this district was a prime district to convert commercial buildings into residential.
Most of the conversions are going to happen in Manhattan, south of 96th Street. What I was saying is that there are some spaces in Long Island City that in downtown Brooklyn where conversions could happen, but most of the conversions are going to be in Manhattan, south of 96th Street.
Well, proposed. Okay, can you answer some of the other
Sheila,
questions?
one of the things we talked about, one of the things that was talked about in land use was that this actually could potentially be a way for other community boards that have not produced.
Oh, I totally agree,
housing.
but that's why in his presentation.
That's one of the reasons we had John come and talk, because that was what was interesting.
No, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's Danielle and John, you in your presentation, you mentioned in one hand, in the beginning, you're saying you want it to be equitable throughout the city, but on the other hand, you're throwing us into like the top three. And so I'm just noticing things are different. And also so-called affordable housing isn't producing affordable housing so far. So I really want to know what are the affordability standards and the livable standards? Otherwise, are we just, being asked to support something that is going to produce more boxes for people to barely live in without all the supported amenities?
Yeah, we view this as
tax incentives to go with it.
Yeah, we view this as a two-step process. In year one, it's about getting rid of the state restrictions. In terms of affordability, the governor has a proposal in her budget, which I'm sure the legislature will negotiate. She's proposing AMI levels from 40% to 100%. So an income of 48,000 for a family of three to 120,000 for a family of three. But I'm sure the legislature will negotiate that. That's just for initial offer. In terms of the stats of affordable housing that's been produced, there's been little affordable housing built below 30% AMI. These are for single individuals making about $30,000 a year. Little of that has been produced in the past 10 years. In terms of work-live space for artisans, we support those types of arrangements, those types of conversions. We're advocating for the state to allow the flexibility for building owners to do these conversions in the first place, because right now they can't do it if their building's built after 1961. And in terms of the size of the space, that's going to be determined largely by the city in terms of what will the minimum size of the apartments have to be, taking into account air and light requirements for the apartment. We just want to get the process started with allowing the state to lift the restrictions, and the city will determine based on the building code, energy code, what the unit sizes should be.
Okay. I'm going to move to Steve. And I'm sorry if this isn't the order you raised your hand and it's the order I see on my screen.
Thank you. Why is it that you're proposing only buildings built before 1990 as compared to buildings before 2000 or 2003 or any other number for that matter?
Yeah, so this recommendation came out from the Department of City Planning, and it was for a few reasons. One, the initial deadline was 1961. Typically, buildings have a 30-year mortgage, so 30 years after is 1990. But also, from 1990 to 2010, very little office stock was built around the city. So the city thought that was a fair designation. The legislature may decide to bump it up to 2000, but the city also doesn't want every office to convert, because we understand that the property tax revenue from commercial buildings is very important. Another reason is that building owners tend to reassess their buildings after their mortgage is satisfied. So a lot of these post-1960 buildings, 30 years later is around 1990, where these buildings are becoming older, where they're more likely to convert. So that's the reasoning that the city gave. The legislature may negotiate it a few years up or down, but that's the reasoning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Tom?
Thank you. And thank you, sir. I referred to the map where you identified the areas in which these conversions could occur. And on that map, I saw a line that rode from the mouth of Newtown Creek to the Dutch Kills along the creek. So number one, I don't know of any buildings there that could be converted, other than the new building that's going up, but I guess that's not included, right? Because it's being built today. So what buildings are identified along Newtown Creek between the mouth of the creek to Dutch Kills? There are none. There's just warehouses. That's number one. Number two is I'm surprised to see this as a place where we're going to put folks, especially after going through a presentation from the Army Corps of Engineers. We need to be returning that space to green, water resilient infrastructure, as opposed to putting people in harm's way with the flooding. Thank you.
Yeah, so the map I showed was based on the Department of City Planning's assessment of where commercial zones are in the city. They didn't say this is where offices must be. And again, I think it's important that we understand the context. There's 600 million square feet of office space across New York City. We expect less than 5% to convert over the course of a decade. We're talking about 200 buildings, if that. So a very small number.
Yeah, I just think, sir, if we depict on a map an area that has the potential for these office conversions and there are none, isn't that just wrong and it should be removed? If there's no buildings there to convert, why is it indicated?
Are you talking about the FAR map? Because that was the map that was talking about that had that part of Queens. Is that what you're
It
referring
was,
to?
I saw a map in your presentation where there was blue, a lot of blue in Manhattan and then some blue in Queens, specifically Long Island City. And there was a strip of it that ran along the creek.
This one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that
So
wasn't a
you see
map
that
of,
little strip?
yeah,
What
so
is this a map of?
that wasn't a map of office space or where offices could be converted. This is a map where zones are allowed for high density FAR, residential. So these are high density census tracts. This doesn't have to do with office space.
So is that, I don't know that to be true. Is that where residential is, it's zoned residential along the creek from the mouth of the creek to the Dutch Kills? I believe it's manufacturing only there.
It's where zoning allows for an FAR of 10. This is accurate. I'm not saying anything's built there. I'm not saying people will build there, but that's what it's zoned for.
So you can build houses there, you're saying?
Yes, on this map, this is where dense housing is allowed.
I think
That's
I can.
very
Can I
surprising to
step
me.
in for a second? Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
Can I clarify? So what John said was that he's looking at census tracts, and so some of those census tracts, the census tracts are shaped differently than the zoning districts, and so it's capturing a little bit more than the actual zoning allows. So that strip on Newtown Creek, Tom, what you're talking about, it's not for housing at all. We know it's
Thank you, that's what I
manufacturing.
thought. Thank you,
It's
thank
just
you
kind
very
of
much. I
a blip in
appreciate
the
it.
map and a weird way of showing it.
I understand, but you understand my question and why I was surprised to see it. Thank you.
Okay. Kenny?
Hi. Would it be proper to characterize what you're proposing as saying you're lifting at least 2 or 3 major restrictions that exist from the state, whereas there's actually nothing in the pipeline in place of those restrictions? You're saying the city would take it over, but there's nothing actually, is it not correct that there's nothing actually in the pipeline proposed to actually replace these? Or what you're really proposing is absolutely lifting restrictions with no actual follow-up as to what will come in their place. Is that a proper characterization?
No, we're asking for the state to lift the FAR cap for the city to determine where higher density makes sense.
Right, but that process does not exist within the city. So this is basically lifting the cap now for something that the city has not really considered, maybe eager to consider, which no one has considered. And so basically any kind of restriction, any kind of cap on that is now sort of free for the open market, as it were.
No, the city would still determine what the FAR is because it would have to go through a rezoning. So the city would still have the say over what gets built. It's just not having its hands tied by Albany.
Okay, now I also noticed on your explanation of FAR, I believe you stopped your illustrations with an FAR of 9. I'd be curious to have a better understanding what a FAR of 12 would actually look like, because realizing that FAR is not just height, it's bulk, but there's a certain point where I believe FAR actually starts to exceed the actual size of a block in terms of what the degree that you could expand laterally. So that certainly would end up increasing heights throughout the city.
It'll depend on the building. I mean, as you mentioned, some buildings take up more of a block than others when it comes to FAR. It really depends on the configuration of the building. Some are taller than others. It really depends.
Right, but this is basically, we're at a point where many of us, myself included, consider the heights that we're experiencing in our own neighborhood as being excessive and planned heights as excessive. And I believe those are only FAR 9 or FAR 10. So I'm very concerned about lifting the cap on FAR 12. Just a comment.
Thanks, Kenny. Moving to Camille.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I'm a little, I think, confused by the presentation, but I guess one point of clarity that I'm seeking is, would developers be required to exclusively build affordable housing on these areas that would get, I suppose, rezoned, or is it the usual, you get to build, make it a percentage, et cetera?
So the governor's proposal allows for a tax incentive if you do affordable housing. That will be negotiated with the legislature, but that's how the process would work. It wouldn't be a mandate, but the tax incentive ideally would incentivize affordable housing. And the reason why the governor put the tax incentive in is because conversions are happening right now, except they're exclusively market rate. 25 Water Street is an example that's being constructed now. It's an $800 million project with 1,200 market rate apartments. And we understand that left to their own devices that there will be more of that with conversions unless there's an incentive for affordability.
So a developer would not, it's not exclusively, we're not talking about making a rezoned area exclusively affordable. It's
correct.
A portion of it.
Correct.
Has that, worked?
The state and city have never had a program for office conversions that had affordability. They've only incentivized the construction with the 421G program. They've never had a tax incentive program for office conversions. So short answer is the state and city have never done this before.
I guess, is the previous program considered a success?
Yes, it revitalized Lower Manhattan. I think looking back at it, there should have been some affordability because it was exclusively market rate condos and rentals. And I mean, if you pass by that area now, rentals are going for $6,000 to $7,000 a month. So I think in hindsight, there should have been some affordability. I think that's why the governor's proposal is trying to correct some of that for a new program that would be citywide.
And is the alternative not rezoning, or is this rezoning happening regardless? And is the, issue about this incentive?
So I think it's two distinct things. The state lifting the restrictions isn't a rezoning. The city taking action, that will be the second step of a rezoning. And the city would have to start that process. The city hasn't said we are going to definitely rezone areas 100%. There's been interest from the mayor and certain council members. But if the state doesn't lift the restrictions, that's kind of moot.
Okay. No, this was helpful. Thank you.
I have to say, when I lived in Manhattan, in Lower Manhattan, a long time ago, I lived in a conversion and it was affordable when I moved in. And then after Hurricane Sandy, it was no longer affordable for other reasons, but it was, it was very nice. And it was what changed the nature of Lower Manhattan at the time, and made it more livable and a more of a community. Laura?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for coming. Great presentation. Most of these proposals are, frankly, I think, no-brainers. I just noticed that abolishing parking minimums wasn't included. Is that simply because all of the areas in the proposal have already have exemptions to this, or
those
it
areas
it doesn't apply? What?
Those areas don't have parking minimums because they are in transit zones. So if they converted to residential, there would be no parking minimums.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. Only question.
Christine?
Yeah, I can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Normally, well, so I just wanted to speak to Kenny's concern because I think there may be a confusion, Kenny. Right now, the city has a full set of controls on every, a zoning map that includes every part of the city and a building code that governs, anything constructed in the city. So what this is, but there's always been this kind of two-tiered or confusing double level of regulation of between city and state of housing built in the city or construction in the city. And I think that's what this initial this initial proposal and this initial state legislation is trying to get rid of, or to sort of get the state off the city's back. The city would still have to enact it to revise their it's not that there would be no regulations, it's that the city would have to then be able to revise its regulations to address these types of buildings, which right now the state won't allow to be converted. Was that clear? I mean, it's not opening up this Pandora's box of buildings that aren't regulated. Even if this initiative is successful and the state regs get changed, a lot of this conversion couldn't happen until the city changes its own regulations to allow these buildings to.
All I was pointing out is that it would seem that there should at least be a discussion simultaneously with the city, so that we kind of have some sense of where this is actually going. Otherwise, we're just basically, lifting a cap, which I understand. That's to sort of free up. I disagree that it would be moot to be working on this. There's countless areas where we attempt to vision what things can or should be, and so my concern is just that doesn't seem. We're not hearing that. We're not hearing. That what next? We're not really seeing.
Yeah, I agree that we're not hearing it. I'm just saying there wouldn't be a vacuum. But I mean, that would actually be a question for Teal, I think, as to how much city planning is currently really thinking about. It would be a question for Teal as well as the buildings department. How, for instance, there was a whole set of regulations that were devised in the 80s to allow loft conversions, and which allowed, changed the code regulations about residences and how far how deep an apartment could be and how much window space an apartment could have, et cetera, to allow lofts to be lived in, these that had previously been manufacturing spaces. And you would need regulations like that to address these apartments in these deep office buildings. But I don't know, Teal, can you let us know whether this is something that's been discussed by city planning?
Yes, many of the points that John has shared are addressed in the city's office adaptive reuse report that I dropped the link in the chat. And I've been talking with the people like in DCP who helped with that report and were a part of that process. And I think it's helpful to look at this kind of along the three different components of what John has shared. So starting with like the actual office reuse and adaptation, we have 2 buildings in Long Island City that have actually already been converted from office to housing uses, and they were also enlarged. So they were the kind of like the projects at the time that those two buildings were created. They're on Queens Plaza South. It was more like a building of a residential tower on top of like an existing loft building. And our team didn't identify any other good candidates for office reuse. So what has been shared with me is that Long Island City it's not really a place that has the kind of building stock that we would expect office conversions. So that's one point. The second point would be on the tax incentives. Any kind of affordability would have to go through a tax incentive program, and it could function similarly to 421A, where developers, it was 421A was a very popular program. It was quite utilized, but it really is only like 20% of the units that are affordable. And so that's kind of one part of the equation, but it's not at all mandatory. We don't have a mechanism right now to make it's a tax incentive program. We don't have MIH for this. And then third, in regards to the 12 FAR cap, the only thing I can really say is we don't have any plans in our pipeline right now to say if the cap was lifted, would we proceed, would we like go down the path of ULURP to change some areas to have a greater FAR? I'm not aware of any plans of that right now. Anything that happens is we would have to, I think the first thing we would have to do is actually have residential districts that have greater than 12 FAR, which we don't have right now. So those districts would have to be created, and then they would also have to be mapped. And that is a ULURP action. And so you all know ULURP quite well. It could be city-led, it could be private applicant-led, and that's a realm that's very unknown to us right now. The city is like somewhat supportive of lifting the 12 FAR cap, but that's just because we do see our position as being kind of the stewards of zoning in the city. Does that help just like shed some light on the city's kind of perspective on this?
If I'm the one being asked, it helps. It's just still, I just feel like we're being asked to sign on to something when there's nothing in the pipeline beyond it. And I've experienced more than one situation where, let's say the phrase was used, we anticipate this or expect that. And then 10 years later, people are saying, we never expected this to happen.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Planning is far from an exact science. It's definitely more of an art. And Long Island City has been a neighborhood that's experienced a lot of the less predictable outcomes of these big plans.
Okay, we are going to go to Sheila and then Patrick, and then we're going to close questions on this because we need to move to the next topic.
So John, most of the areas are waterfront, I noticed. And we are also, as a number of people are referred to, the climate crisis, and there's increased push to not build as much on the waterfront. So there should, because it does impact resiliency issues. So would this be considered if waterfront development or conversions was removed from the plan?
Right now, that's in the current proposal, but again, really most of these conversions are going to be in Midtown East and Midtown West, not near the far east or far west side, really talking about the Times Square area.
Okay, because I saw the red parts on the map were mostly waterfront. That's why I was looking.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. Patrick?
Yeah, I think I might have lost or missed something, but is there an ask here, or is this just a presentation on the program, on the
yes, we're asking for a letter of support from the community board to support office conversions being allowed for buildings built after 1961, lifting the FAR cap to allow the city to determine what that is, and making sure there's some affordability as a part of the office conversions.
And Patrick, in the next part of the meeting, in the business part of the meeting, we're going to talk about the point of view that the land use committee has and take a vote. Okay. Okay, so we're going to thank you, John. Thanks for coming and presenting to us twice. And we will be talking about this in the second part of the meeting, and we'll let you know. And with that, we are going to move to the business section of the meeting. And start with attendance.
All right. Available day.
I'm here, present.
Council Usher, present. John Bahia.
Here. I saw him.
Present. Hello.
John
Sorry, go
Bahia,
ahead.
you were here. I saw you.
I'm here. I'm here.
He's
Okay,
here.
folks hear me or no?
Okay, there he is.
Sorry. I'm
Carisha?
still right now, but
Please speak up. Some of your volumes are low.
Carisha, what's
can't hear, but who?
Carisha?
Anatole, yeah, you need to speak up a little, Anatole. Sorry. Carisha, you were here.
Welcome back, I guess. Nick Berkowitz is excused. Sandra Begichka.
Here.
Ed Bloomfield.
Here.
Daniel Brecker.
Present.
Yaroslav Bone,
Absent.
Tanya Chavez,
I saw her. She was here.
Present.
there you
Thank
go.
you.
Osman Chaudhary,
Yes, present.
Stephen Cooper,
Here.
Kelly Craig is excused, Warren Davis,
Here.
Isabella is excused, Sally Frank,
I did not see Sally. Sally, are you here? She's absent.
Maury Gallagher,
Present.
William Garrett,
I did not see him. He's absent.
Somnath Kimire,
Yes, present. Present.
Dr. Raz,
Present.
Camille Gray,
Here.
Kenneth Greenberg,
Here.
Ben Gutman, Christine Hunter,
Ben, I saw you.
Oh. I'm present.
Thank you.
Jewel Chaudhary, is an absent, Budun Khan, is he away? Chairman Lama,
I'm here.
Sheila Lewandowski, I see you. Benjamin Lucas.
Sheila, you're here?
I was muted. Sorry about that.
I saw your
I'm
response.
not muted.
Benjamin Lucas.
See him?
We'll back.
He's absent.
Patrick Martinez.
Here.
Kristen McGowan.
Kristen McGowan, I
earlier.
saw you.
Tom Matuzis.
Present, thank you.
Riley Owens.
I'm here.
Sarah Oza.
I'm here.
Elliot Park.
Absent.
Carla Perez.
Absent.
Selena Romero.
Absent.
Roberto Saldana.
Present.
Laura Shepard.
Here.
Ryan Smith.
Here.
Alan Spitzer.
Present.
Lauren Springer.
Here.
Funsak Tashi.
Absent.
Akela Thomas.
Good evening, everyone. I am here.
Good evening. Mary Torres.
Stuck on an iPhone, but here.
There you are. And Frank Luke.
Absent.
We go once round and try to get the people. We said we'd go back for Krisha.
Carisha had problems. She said she'd be back, but I don't see her. Carisha?
Can we count that as well? We count as present. And that,
Ben Gutman, are you here? He was here earlier. I saw him. He's not here now. So you have to be present at attendance.
Yep.
He's absent.
and Benjamin Lucas.
Benji's ill. So,
Okay.
Yeah, he's absent. And Kristen McGowan, you were here earlier. Okay, I'm sorry. But you do have a quorum.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anatole, I apologize for that. Go
Yep,
ahead.
all good. We have quorum. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to approval of minutes for both January and February.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the January and February minutes, please.
With someone that was in Paro. Would someone like to second that?
I second them.
Seconded that? Who was the second just now?
John
Tom Matuzis.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anyone opposed? We don't, this isn't roll call, right? We can just.
Show of hands is fine.
Okay.
Anyone opposed? Okay, unanimously approved.
Thank you all.
Yeah, if people weren't present, should they be abstaining?
They should
If they
be.
read the minutes and they agree with it, they can vote.
Oh, true.
It's actually a little tricky when both minutes were lumped together, though, to do that.
Okay, do we want to go back and do a motion for just the January minutes?
I'm happy to clarify my motion.
Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to approve the January minutes.
Is there a second?
Yes.
I second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Sheila.
Unanimous. Sheila, you're abstaining?
Yeah, believe it or not, I'm pretty sure I missed that meeting. That's what I'm trying to check. There were so many.
Okay.
So can I make a motion now to approve the February minutes?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Roz seconded it. Is anyone opposed? Does anyone abstain?
This is Mary Torres. I'm abstaining, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
And motion carries.
Both motions, right?
One abstention for January and one abstention for February.
Great, thanks, everyone. Okay, I will go ahead with my chairperson's report. A couple things. First, right after the last board meeting in February, I went to a borough board meeting about the preliminary 2024 city budget. The borough president wanted borough chair, community board chairs and council people, when they could come, in support of his pushback, I'll say, on the city budget, which is very concerning. It's an austerity budget and it cuts almost every single thing that we need in our community. So we participated in a lengthy presentation on what the preliminary budget looks like, and then why, and then the pushback on that. So I voted yes, as did all the community board chairs, that we supported the borough president's pushback on the budget. There was testimony this week, and this is an ongoing process. So as it continues, I will keep you informed, but also there might come a time when we write a resolution from CB2 calling out problems within the city budget. Next, I, along with Christine and Roz, attended and many of you online, attended the town hall on the Army Corps seawalls plan. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the next part of, I think next. But it was a very informative presentation. It was well attended by people both in our area and actually from Queens Community Board 1, as well as Greenpoint and that community in that area. So very informative, lots of questions, not a lot of answers, and we will talk about it at length and the resolution we've put together shortly. I want to invite all of you to march or man the table at the St. Pat's for All Parade this coming Sunday. We do have a spot to march in the parade. So if anybody would like to march, you can let me know. I'll put my, actually just let the board office know, but we'll meet up, I would say, at that corner by Lou Labdotti at maybe 11:45, 10:12. And I really encourage everybody to march. I've marched several years and it's a fun time. We will also have a table. Anatole is going to captain the table, and there will be signups for the newsletter and other fun things to do at the table. So anyone who wants to participate, you can let the board office know or just show up at about 11:45 on Sunday at Lou Labdotti. Okay. Also this coming week on Wednesday, next Wednesday, the 8th, I will be speaking at the Garaja Prasad Hariola Foundation of America. They're celebrating International Women's Day, Black History Month last month, and their 3rd anniversary. They're having a dinner. Several people will be speaking. They asked me to speak. I'm very honored. And they've also invited all of the CB2 board members to this event, to attend this event. We will send something out from the office. It's from 5 to 9 next Wednesday night at Gulshland Terrace. So if anyone can make it, that would be amazing. And then lastly, and I'm sure we'll cover this again, the meeting for next month is shifted by a week. It will be on, oh, I don't have the date, but it will be the Thursday. It will be the 2nd Thursday of the month. Because
April 13th.
The 13th of April, because of Passover and Easter I think it's the 2nd night of Passover when the meeting should have been, and Good Friday is the next day. So we will be shifting the meeting. And to all those who celebrate, I wish you a good Passover and a good Easter. So that is my report. And with that, we'll turn it over to Debbie.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to remind everybody, it's very important when you change your phone number, your address, your email addresses. If you want to use an email address for CB2, please make sure you notify us so we have all the correct information, because some of you move, some of you change, and you forget to tell the board office, and we need that information correct for our files and to contact you, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to remind you, please don't forget. We have a number of issues that we've been working on. We have approximately 36 complaints for the month of February. The top complaints have been NYPD complaints, robberies, double parking, illegal smoke shops, illegal vendors. We addressed them at the cabinet meeting. Hopefully we'll get some updates and results. The Department of Transportation is number 2 with signals, potholes. Sanitation was number 3 with garbage issues. So we're trying to follow up. I attended the borough president's town hall in your district. All the agencies were in attendance and some of the board members. It was great to see people in person. It was nice to be able to have a conversation and not see everybody in a little square box. So it was really heartwarming and nice. DEP, we have a lot of bioswales that are filthy and dirty. We're working with DEP to have some of those bioswales within the community board cleaned up. If you have a bioswale near where you live, where you work, where you travel, and you have an exact location, please give it to us so we can get DEP to clean them up, because they're really becoming an eyesore in the community. We had a complaint we gave to Parks during the snowstorm for Lieutenant Michael Davidson Playground, and we gave it to the Parks for the crew to clean that up. Remember, March 12th is daylight savings time. We're going to spring ahead and get to have more daylight, which is exciting. And again, we're still posting, and our next meeting is April 13th. And remember, if you see something, say something, let us know. If you have a complaint, if you have an update, please let us know. We follow them up. I have a cabinet meeting every month, and I try to, we have a hot complaint. We finally worked on it. I think Maury is we're finally moving with that vendor issue and we're moving forward, and the fire department again is going to go out there, and they finally gave some summonses. So it took a very long time, but you know, we keep pushing, we keep talking about it. We don't let up on our chronic issues and complaints. So I want to make sure that.
Thank you, Debbie.
So we're still working on it. They've assured me at the last meeting, fire department's going to go out there again, and PD is going to go out there again. And I have the mayor's office making sure that we can get a little push from everywhere we can. So thank you. So yeah, so if you have a complaint, let us know. Thanks. And,
Thank you.
we'll enjoy more sunlight this month.
Yeah, I totally forgot. That's like the most exciting news ever. Okay. Okay. Teal.
Turning it back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks. Teal, city planning. I didn't forget this month.
Thank you. Hi again. Excuse me. So right now, community district, there's 2 projects in ULURP in community district 2 at the moment. One of them is 2310 Queens Plaza South, which you all recently sent a recommendation in on. The vote for this project at the CPC will be on March 15th, and then the application will proceed to City Council review. And then the second project is 6110 Queens Boulevard, which is the Planet Fitness rezoning. And this application is supposed to have its public hearing also on March 15th. And that's all my updates. I'm happy to take any questions.
Sheila?
Hi, Teal. This is a question, something that hasn't been brought up, but it was brought up in an earlier meeting I was in. Can you speak to the zoning request, and it's been out there for a little while, to make dancing legal again in communities? In public places?
So this is part of one of our citywide text amendments in like the City of Yes suite. And that is, so the idea is to have broader uses generally in commercial districts, and to remove certain kind of what we kind of look at as like old and antiquated zoning text, such as not allowing dancing in certain commercial districts. Do you have any more specific questions or any kind of issues or concerns you're worried about?
Well, I wanted to get more information. It was in an arts, citywide arts meeting I was in today, and just to be specific, it's so places that have live music or bands, or even at a benefit, or if it's currently, just so folks know, in certain areas it's not allowed for more than, if you have 3 or more people, to start moving in rhythm to the music. And that, isn't that kind of how it's written?
That's exactly right. It's so right now what we're kind of targeting, and just to let you know, Lisa has asked me to have some presentations on these text amendments to offer more clarity, and it's something that our team is working on. It's just we're so early that our team isn't quite comfortable going out and sharing, so we don't have a lot to
There's
share
a webpage on City of Yes, but
it's not, there's not much out there right now.
I'm pretty curious about, City of Yes has a whole bunch of stuff, and to me, this one just seems so ridiculous to me that I almost feel like it could be pushed on its own, and then a lot of the other elements of City of Yes. I'd be curious to know how many people have not danced illegally, even on this call, then based on those standards.
Yeah, exactly to your point, it's if you just have a bar, you're not allowed to have dancing. And there's that's one part of just the zoning for economic, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name right now, but it's something like zoning for economic resiliency. That one kind of allowing dancing, though, is also part of a kind of a suite of these kinds of small actions that is also potentially removing the floor area cap on what a kitchen space is, so that we can have more kind of incubation spaces for small businesses. So that's just another example of a lot of these kind of small moves that we want to remove from zoning, want to remove the burdens that zoning is placing on businesses. And that's part of why like it takes a little bit longer, because some things we think are, we kind of agree with you, are no brainers. We're pretty much fine with people dancing in bars, and maybe restaurants and other kinds of like regular venues out in your neighborhoods. But there's also a lot of other things to consider. And right now, I think our team is really focused on like understanding any kind, unintended uses that, or unintended consequences of what could happen within this text amendment. But I ask our internal team often, like every few weeks, whether we are ready to present. So I hope that we'll be able to come back to you.
Thank you.
Come back
As
up
I say,
to-
services maybe to like, because there's, like I said, so many things, like one or two of them could be taken on their own for resolutions. But thank you, Teal.
Of course.
Any other questions for Teal? Thanks, Teal. I have the feeling we're going to be talking more when we get to the land use committee. Okay, and with that, we're going to move to committee votes and reports, and we are going to start with land use. And we actually have two things to discuss within land use tonight, and I will turn it over to Christine.
Yes, hi. Yeah, so Lisa couldn't be here tonight, so I will basically, I think our last meeting was focused on the two things I'm going to talk about, so this sort of constitutes that report. So on the 5-borough housing movement, just to reiterate what John Sanchez said, we're being asked to provide a letter of support for this initiative, which is for an action in the state budget. And there were many questions and a lot of discussions at the meeting, but in the end, there was a motion to that was made by Kenny and seconded by Tanya for a letter of support, but with the following stipulations. These all have to do with the affordable housing component of the mandate that affordable housing there be an incentive for affordable housing under this initiative. And the 6 stipulations that the committee wanted to add were: 1, to lower the proposed AMI affordability tiers. The second was that affordable housing created under this initiative, or created in these converted office buildings, would be permanently affordable, which differs from a lot of other tax incentive programs, which often have a sunset period that comes up all too quickly. And then that there be preferences for permanent apartments to accommodate the underhoused, that there be a preference also in the case of condo conversions for affordable home ownership, that there be a mix of bedroom sizes to accommodate larger families, and that there be protections for existing businesses in those buildings. So those were the 6 concerns of the land use committee. Is there more discussion of these? Do people?
Yeah, there are some.
If I may, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble raising my hand. Was there any consideration to including in that a requirement that there be infrastructure and availability of services in these areas? Because, we've seen the mistake that the prior administration made with housing our most vulnerable in areas absent any infrastructure or services. And we wouldn't want to see that repeated here. Thank you.
I understand what you're saying. And in fact, this was discussed at the committee, that I think this, whether that really, again, as we discussed previously, a lot of the actual implementation of any of this is going to be up to the city to follow up on once the state removes its limitation on the conversions of these buildings. But I think we could add, if people want, we could add a stipulation that planning for required amenities to support the additional housing units also be.
And thank you,
included.
Christine. And I like the word as opposed to amenities, which seems like extra. I'm talking about like staple services, like
Yeah.
you don't have to go more than a mile to get to a grocery store, like staples.
Yep.
Um,
So when there's a motion made for this, we can include that in the motion, right, Steve?
do you have I mean, so the language would be that planning for housing in commercial districts include planning for basic neighborhood services to support the new units. Is that?
That is correct. And possibly if not, then the city has to make it happen first.
Okay, I'm gonna go through the hands that are up, starting with Steve.
Yeah, first of all, Tom, do you want to make that as a motion so we actually have something we're talking about?
Yep.
I'd like to make that a motion, yes. Thank you,
If
Steve.
somebody wants to second it.
I'll second.
Can I second and add something I was gonna?
Okay, so the motion is now on the floor. I've got a couple of things to point out, Christine, and to the board. First of all, they said that none of this concerns Community Board 2. So the question is, why are we voting to support something that doesn't concern us, but affects our neighbors, people who should vote for themselves? The second point I'd like to make about this is that if people who own or corporations who own these large office buildings wish to convert them to residential, they can do so now through seeking a variance. I don't think there's been a ton of people seeking variances. Now, if they sought variances, all the restrictions that we've mentioned at the land use could be put on it. So why are we voting now? And the reason that I asked that question is because if we vote yes with 15 different provisions as is being proposed, it goes in as a yes, which means the city is going to be able to say that 52 community boards in the city of New York all support this. So I caution you that if you vote yes, even with the restrictions, you're voting yes on something that does not concern us, at least not now, and does concern our neighbors. Thank you.
Is John Sanchez still here?
Yes, I'm still here.
I guess in terms of why, I might throw this back at you as to why you consider it important for community boards. I mean, I do understand that there is some commercial real estate in CB2 that, possibly could be converted to residential use, but you've said over and over that most of the building stock for which this is appropriate is in Manhattan below 96th Street. So why are you coming to community boards outside of Manhattan?
Yes, well, simply Manhattan, south of 96th Street hasn't done its fair share of affordable housing. If more housing is allowed in Manhattan, south of 96th Street, it eases the housing pressure in other parts of the city, including areas like the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. When it comes to housing policy, what happens in one neighborhood impacts another. And because we're advocating for state legislation, it's important for us to go across the city because this would impact the entire city.
Okay, thank you. And then in relation to Steve, what you said about, buildings being able to go for a variance, I'm not sure if, I truly don't know, maybe you do, whether you can go to the BSA the Bureau of Standards and Appeals has jurisdiction to waive state laws.
No, they didn't. They do not have the jurisdiction to go against state laws. What I'm saying is that there are plenty of office towers now which are under a 12 FAR, and if they wanted to convert, they can in fact go at this point to seek a variance. Yet, to my knowledge, very few have. Okay, so the question is, why are we opening up this possible floodgate to allow people to do it? When we approve an item in front of us, somebody wants to build a 20-story tower. Let's call it City Core Tower in Long Island City. Had they come to us at that time and said they wanted to build a 50-story residential building there, I think we would have all said no, and probably wouldn't have taken us more than half a second to have said it, because it did not have all the other things that were needed, such as subway. It would have been a tremendous burden on our schools. It would have been a burden on the police department, a burden on the hospital and health department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas we approved an office building because an office building has less of an effect on the various services. And it's also gone at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So it doesn't affect people at night. So sometimes we approve something because it fits into the plans that we see for our neighborhood at that time. Do we actually want to say that the stuff that we approved in the late 80s, when I was a member, a chairman, in fact, of land use, do we want to say that those buildings should now be allowed to do something totally different than what we authorized them to do? I have a little bit of a problem with that. When you go for variances, it's a one-by-one situation, and we can deal with each one of them individually as compared to a carte blanche.
Um,
I'm trying to raise my hand, but I can't because I don't know how to use this phone.
Actually, Anatole is next. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I totally disagree with Steve. Sorry, like, times change, right? Like, that's as easy as that, right? You didn't have smartphones in 19. Yeah, so I don't want to make light of it, but it's just that's one thing. But also, I totally disagree. It impacts the city overall. Like if we're worried about overcrowding and the rental market around here is insane because there's no inventory around here. Guess what's going to help? More inventory in Midtown Manhattan and Lower Manhattan and all those areas. And you can easily build those areas up. There all the delis where you can get some light groceries and hot buffet food. That easily turns into grocery stores, things like that, laundromats. Like it's a dense neighborhood. And businesses want to be there. They want to support the density and make money. So. So I totally think this, this totally makes sense. And it's, also advocacy 101, right? You show, you get as many people to sign up for your thing, and you show, you show support to it. It's like signing why is the word skipping?
Petition?
Petition. Yes, yes, it's signing a petition. It's like, I absolutely think it makes total sense to, total sense to support it, of course, and I don't even disagree with the stipulations they came up with, but I do, I just want to clarify something. So, it seems to me like it's a two-step thing that Five Borough is asking for, John Sanchez is asking for. Step one is just to get just to be able to zone these areas for less market rate housing and more for less market rate housing, right? And in my opinion, less market rate housing is better than more market rate housing. So, and then step two to me seems like each of these buildings are going to come up to are going to be an issue for each individual community board to deal with. And yes, like we need to reform how AMI is calculated, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But it seems like for this specific thing, this initiative, this movement is just asking for that is trying to advocate for that first step. Let's just have the possibility of zoning for less market rate housing in these office buildings. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, John. So I mean, I'm fine with all those stipulations, but all those stipulations seem to me like it's a part of a distant step two. Phase one is let's just get this possible to do, right? So I would love to be in a city where this.
And Anatole, you broke up at the end, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying.
Let's do this.
Okay, I'm going to move to Patrick.
Christine, there was one term that was used that I have to plead ignorance to. You mentioned underhoused. It feels like a little binary. So what is underhoused? And are we voting on supporting it, or are we voting to have a statement made? Because the statement has not been put together yet, right?
Right. What I listed were stipulations that were formulated by the land use committee that would go into a letter of support. In other words, we support this initiative with the following concern, you know, with a request for the following to be incorporated into any legislation. Tom, do you want to define underhoused? Because I'm actually not sure there's exactly what that term means.
I'm not sure if I used underhoused or I said unhoused. It's the alternative word to homeless.
Okay, unhoused.
It may have been that the term should have been unhoused, and it didn't get into the land use minutes correctly. So we can.
Understood.
I'm happy to change it to unhoused, because I agree that underhoused is a little ambiguous. A lot of us.
Yeah, I'm not sure what underhoused is. I know unhoused as being.
Okay. Thank you,
homeless.
Patrick, for pointing that out.
Yeah. And then Christine, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to be.
We'll come back. Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I just wanted to be sure that it's about a statement that has not been put together yet, but it would include those stipulations.
Yeah, no, the letter of support has not yet been fully drafted, but the board would need to authorize this full board would just need to authorize that letter.
Got it. Okay.
Christine, and if I may, I think
can we come
one addition.
Can we come back?
Oh, go ahead.
And
Yes.
There's a bunch of
Go ahead.
people with their hands raised.
Understood. Yes, please call upon. Thank you.
Laura.
All right, I'll be quick. I strongly support everything Anatole just said. I commend the land use committee for the thoughtful stipulations. And again, think most of this is a no-brainer. And Long Island City is literally in the footprint of the proposal, and we are absolutely connected to the areas around us and impacted. We're all impacted by each other because we're a city, and that's it.
Thanks, Laura. Sheila?
Thank you. Thank you to the Land Use Committee. I really appreciate the thoughtful additions. I do want to support Thomas's on some kind of livability standards and include shared public amenities and not gated amenities, because that's actually caused less community interaction and fewer spaces for community to meet, etc. I did want to make one correction. Anatole asked John, and he said the point of this is for the bulk of it to be would be nice. It was truly affordable housing. But I didn't hear a percentage of how much would be market, and the goal that I heard from Anatole is that it not be more market rate, but I thought a lot of this would be market rate, with a percentage of it being somewhat affordable. There was something else I read online that I didn't see in the stipulations, was that the city would really define what was the needed or the height. And I know this has to go through ULURP, so I want to make sure the community does have some say in what needed services and amenities are, because we're not getting them. And that goes to Tom Atuzis's point about people being underserved and decreasing community as opposed to increasing community. So John,
Sheila, I said my understanding is that this allows for less market rate housing,
but I don't think it does, and that's where I wanted to get clarification, because less market rate,
or I guess put it another way, it allows for more affordable quote unquote housing. Or
I'm not disagreeing with you so much as I want to make sure it's clear, because 421A was supposed to encourage more affordable housing and technically has not. And so I'm kind of asking if there's a percentage
on your computer if you prefer.
I'm sorry, this
bookkeeping.
And can anyone who's not speaking please mute? Thank you.
So that I just in support of what you're saying, that's not what I heard. And so I just I'm asking John for some clarification on that.
The proposal is for a tax incentive for affordable housing. One of the stipulations that the board is considering is to have deeper AMIs, which I think answers your question about having more affordability as a condition of your support.
Well, it was about not increasing this necessarily the stock of market rate housing is the part of the point. So how, like, what, is there a minimum balance in these developments?
Right now, office conversions are happening with 100% market rate. With a tax
Right, but
incentive, new
I understand
offices
that.
wouldn't be that.
So there is no answer, which is fine. It sounds like, so the conversion could apply to an 80-20 situation.
Yes, it could, depending on what the state negotiates.
That's Anatole, I wanted that clarity.
So just to clarify, I mean, and I'm sorry, Danielle, John, if I understand right, the program would, the legislation would create an incentive program that currently doesn't exist. Where
Correct.
developers would get an incentive to create affordable housing, but it wouldn't mandate that they create the affordable housing. Is that correct?
They would only get the incentive if they had affordable housing. If they had no affordable housing, they would get no incentive.
But they could still do the conversion.
They can do it now, and that's what Stephen was talking about.
Okay, great. So we're not,
Okay.
it's not going to guarantee a certain number of units that of affordable units. It's only going to create a program to incentivize them.
Camille?
Great. Yeah, I'm really uncomfortable supporting this proposal, certainly for two reasons. First, I feel like the presentation was a little unclear, and just based on all of the questions that I've heard, I don't think anybody has a very good understanding of what this is about. I feel like the questions have been all over the place in their assumptions. And I think, you know, if you want to make a decision based on a sort of misunderstanding or wrong understanding, that's up to you. But I think it would be in our best interest maybe to all look into this a little bit more. I don't know if there's if this is under sort of a time pressure, if this has to be done. The second issue is that this seems like a huge windfall for building owners, commercial building owners right now who can't give away their space. So I'm a little uncomfortable with just having a tax incentive. It seems like this would be a huge win if the zoning laws were changed to allow for residential housing, and not having any sort of tie to ensure that affordable housing is created. It just does not sit well with me. So I would like to learn more about this issue. And can you clarify, John, is there a time period this is going before, I guess, the governor or the what is the legislative process actually?
The state has to pass the budget before April 1st. So we have 4 weeks before the legislature decides.
Okay. Got it. And what is the current, I guess, legislative landscape looking like?
It's in the governor's budget, and the one house budgets are expected to be released on the 15th. And it's expected that the one house budgets include some form of this concept in their one house budgets.
Okay, thank you.
Mary?
So my feedback is specifically to Steve's point about the consideration of having every building go through a variance or request for ULURP change or zoning change per building. I think the rate in which they're looking to enable affordable housing to be able to require each building to go through every zoning request building by building, I think just muddies, it's just a slog, and it just basically puts cement blocks on their feet to be able to get this done quickly. There's definitely the fact that you have a timeline on on the budget, but it's also the fact that if you're really looking at the amount of housing that needs to be built in the time it needs to be built, to be able to need having one by one requests would just slow down the whole process. And I don't think that's what the governor is looking for. So I support it.
Thanks, Mary. Tom?
Thank you, and thank you for my putting me in my place. So I just want to know, is my amendment accepted, or where are we with that? So, I want to just rephrase, because we seem to move away from that, which is when considering office conversions, staple services such as grocery stores, public green space, libraries, be considered in part of the criteria for the office conversion. But again, my concern is we've seen the past administrations take clusters of unhoused and move them to areas where they basically created new clusters in areas where there is no infrastructure or services. So I really don't want to see this repeated. So I just want to check, where are we with the addition that I've asked for?
We're right now, Tom, we're discussing it. That's basically what this is. We've just had a lot of discussion on it. And I'm
okay. No, I just asked because there was a lot of discussion on a lot of stuff, but I didn't hear anyone
I thought Christine accepted the amendment.
Yeah, I thought we did.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I just want to check.
I'm happy to, we don't really have a move, what's the right code? A motion on the floor to approve.
Yes, we do. We have the motion to approve land uses recommendation with the addition of what Tom added. That was a motion that was made.
Yes, that is the motion.
Okay,
and now
forgive me,
we're
I
discussing.
misunderstood. I thought the motion only had to do with his amendment. But in that case, yes, Tom, there's a motion on the floor that would include what I read out from the land use committee plus your proposed amendment.
Thank you,
Who was
Christine.
the
I appreciate
second
it.
on that motion?
I don't know.
I have Tom making the motion, and who's the second on the motion?
I don't know, but I'll second it just to keep it on the floor.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. I appreciate it.
With the amendment.
With the amendment. Okay, Caroline.
To piggyback off of Mary's point, maybe Christine, if you could clarify too, just for my own knowledge. If this didn't happen and all of these buildings had to go one by one through BSA for a variance, we wouldn't have any negotiation sort of power like with the Paragon paint thing. However, if we went ahead with this and they have to go through a normal ULURP process, then it does give us a little more. Is that correct?
Well, you're right that the approval process for a BSA variance is different, and it doesn't include a full ULURP process. It does go to the community board, but our power is extremely limited, and it doesn't go through city council.
Yeah, so it would be more about, we would be able to negotiate for more if it.
Christine, are you saying that a person who comes to us with a variance that we don't have the ability to negotiate when we put our stamp of approval or disapproval on it? I mean, from all the years I've done it, we certainly did.
Well, I would say based on the Paragon paint process, we made our case as strongly as we could, and I'm not sure how much influence we had.
Yeah,
and the fact that there was no that there was no ULURP process, and therefore that our city council person had no jurisdiction, and all those other entities that are a part of the ULURP process have no jurisdiction, I think does make it a much more limited process.
But if I could speak without raising my hand, with the BSA, there are very specific technical findings.
Yeah.
If they meet those findings, it's a home run, and we have no input whatsoever.
Thank you, Kenny.
Okay. I'm going to speak last on this. I support this. I believe we're in a crisis. It's imperfect, but every solution we're going to find is going to be imperfect. And I do believe the Community Board 2 has done its part, has done a really good job in contributing to affordable housing. And I think this will mostly take this out of CB2, and I think that's important, and like, let Manhattan, do their part. But that's my personal opinion. And with that, I'm closing comments, and is this a voice vote, Steve, or is this a show of hands?
Is this a ULURP item?
No, this is just a letter of
No.
support.
In that case, we don't have to do an actual count. Only the ULURP do we have to do an actual count. And we could do
And
it by,
BSA.
yeah.
Okay.
This is not BSA either. So the answer is yes, we can do it by raise of hands.
Okay.
Doesn't somebody have to call the question?
Yes.
I move to call the question.
Thank you.
There has to be a second.
Second.
Laura seconded.
Well, a vote of yes means that the Community Board 2 is supporting the findings of the Land Use Committee with the additional amendment that Thomas has made. That's what a vote of yes is. A vote of no says no. Simple.
No, you're not doing a roll call vote unless you want to say yes or no.
Debbie, what's easiest for you?
However you would like to do it is fine. You want to keep the record and have everybody's record of how they voted, that's fine.
I don't think we need to do, I think we can.
I think we should ask if there are any people opposed.
Okay,
If
so
there
let's do
are,
that.
then have a roll
Right.
call.
Yeah, so is there anyone opposed? Raise your hand through Zoom if you can.
Could we repeat the amendment that Tom made again, please? I just want to clarify the conflict of interest on my end, because I work in the state. So
Tom, do you want to repeat your amendment?
Yes, thank you. When considering office conversions, please consider staple services such as grocery stores, public green space, and libraries as a condition for the conversion.
I would add schools to that.
Thank you. I'm fine with that. I accept that.
Point of information.
Yes, Maury.
I just want to clarify, maybe the parliamentarian can, or Debbie, what the rules on conflict of interest are, because I think it has to be a monetary interest, right?
And you just working for something doesn't make it a monetary interest, right?
I think so, but I don't know exactly.
Well, I'm going to define it loosely as to whether the success or failure of the motion materially affects the person. So it could be more than just money, in my opinion. And that's really, it's up to the person to make that decision for themselves, whether there's a conflict. If we were voting on an increase of salary for all state employees, then yes, you'd certainly have a conflict. If we were voting to give all state employees 5 days off additionally a year, even though that's not money, that again, would you go a material benefit? So that's the way I would ask you to look at it.
okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, is anyone opposed to the amendment, to the letter of support with Tom's amendment?
Can we abstain?
Yes.
Yep. Okay,
I thought you can only
Right
abstain.
now,
if
no
you have a
one's
conflict.
opposed.
no one's
Right now,
opposed.
no one's opposed. Is anyone abstaining?
Right.
But I think that was the part of the clarification.
I thought you can only abstain if you have a conflict.
You can
So,
abstain. It
Camille,
just
are you
counts as a-
abstaining? Or you have no voting?
Abstaining.
Okay, so then it would be, at this moment, it would be
I'm
unanimous.
I'm gonna join Camille on the abstention.
Okay, so,
Can I ask the parliamentarian to clarify? I tend to agree with what I think Maury was saying, that abstaining is not allowed. However, there's no reason you can't just walk away and then it'll be counted as a non-vote.
That is correct. Technically, abstention counts as
a
a
no
no
vote.
vote, and you should only abstain if there's some particular reason, such as you missed the entire discussion, or you're not, well, disqualified. It's not a question of disqualification. It's really that you don't have enough information to make the choice. You could abstain, but it counts as a no vote.
Well, then I actually do abstain because I don't feel like I have enough information.
And I'm going to join you in abstaining, Sheila.
so that's three.
Yeah, so will I, and I'll join that too, Lauren.
Neil, Sheila, and Stephen are abstaining.
And Lauren,
Sheila.
yeah.
So it's Sheila, Camille. Who's the third abstention?
Steve.
And then Lauren is going to join that too, the abstention. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So then, and then Debbie, we don't need to do anything else, right?
No, I'll have the exact count for who's here for the attendance.
Okay. Okay. Christine, I know there's a second thing, but I'm going to interrupt you because, and I would not normally do this, but Dan Wiley from Nydia Velasquez's office is here. And since Nydia is most of our new representative, and Dan Wiley was instrumental in the town hall to talk about the seawalls that we're going to talk about next, I was going to let him just talk to us for a few seconds, few minutes. Dan?
Great. Okay. Great, thanks. So yeah, I'm Dan Wiley, Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez's district director. This part of Queens is new for us. Not that new, because part of Sunnyside was in her district 10 years ago. Some of you may remember Evelyn Cruz, who was district director covering, she still is, but she's covering southern parts of Queens. Anyway, thanks Danielle and others for coming to the Army Corps meeting. I just put in the chat a link to, or how to comment on the Army Corps HAT study, which is the Harbor Tributaries, basically resiliency study on how to protect basically the area around Newtown Creek. And I'm also going to put in the chat a link to the recording so you can see the action that was last Thursday, and explains a little bit more. There was also an opportunity for the groups around Newtown Creek, including the Conservancy, the Hunters Point Parks Conservancy was represented. So you had a number of groups around Newtown Creek who raised concerns, as well as the Congresswoman. So you can view that videotape and make your comment by the deadline of March 7th. Secondly, some of you are going to attend a meeting that the Congresswoman is holding at the Sunnyside Community Center with basically community leaders to have an opportunity to hear the Congresswoman's priorities for this 118th Congress, and also hear you and your priorities in the community. So this is an opportunity to meet your new Congresswoman, Nydia Velasquez. It is by invitation, but anyone on the community board who wishes to attend, I put my info in the chat. Just shoot me an email. I'll send you the link, or anyone who has the link on the community board, you can forward it to your colleagues, and folks can register and come. We have plenty of capacity. So that is going to be at the Sunnyside Community Center next Monday from 6 to 8. And I know a bunch of you are already registered to come. So more are welcome to come. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dan. We have one question from Sheila, and Sheila, I'm going to ask you to keep it quick because we have to get through the seawall.
This is very quick. Hi, Dan. So today I found out about the appropriations that are open from the U.S. Senate. And they're all like, I found out today and they're due on Monday. Is there something of the equivalent happening?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a very good, I was going to bring it up and I thought it's going to be too hard to explain, but the deadline is pretty much for submissions mid-month. And I'll be blasting out an email with instructions on how nonprofits can apply. It's basically called community project funding. Under Republican rule, they have greatly constrained the number of categories that you can get money for. So for instance, you used to get health and hospitals. We can't get that. We used to have education. We can't get that. But we can get capital funds for public buildings, for instance, transportation, some agriculture, most of it rural, but there are some applications for stormwater, green infrastructure, hopefully in urban areas. So I have a link that will take you to the guidance, And then folks can go on our website, call me, ask questions. And also, if you come to our community leader meeting on Monday, we'll talk more about that. And everyone should look at it. Basically, organizations need to have pretty good capacity to withstand scrutiny. Let me put it that way. And have like a CPA on staff and be able to deal with federal red tape. That said, we have a lot of organizations that got really good grants in the last 2 years through this process, and we should continue that.
Thank you. Thank
you.
Dan, for joining the meeting, and thanks for the meeting that we'll see you on Monday night. Oh, actually, Kat has a question as well.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I know that the community projects funding is due in like 4 days. No?
No, not exactly.
Senate? That's only for Senate?
Yeah, it's just that the Senate, they're just making up their own deadline because we're bicameral. So the U.S. House of Representatives, we have our own deadlines, and the senators have their deadlines.
Gotcha.
I mean, I'll spill the beans that the actual deadlines for many of these is between March 24th and the last day of March. But that said, we need to get proposals in 2 weeks in advance to be able to massage it and, make the pegs fit in the holes, basically.
March 10th is basically.
And it's a lot. It's a lot because we need, what's involved is not just a proposal, but layers of support. So you have to provide, at least a number of letters of support, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through. So that's why we need lead time of getting the initial proposal in through our website.
And so are you also prioritizing meetings with organizations, given that this is like a crazy tight turnaround?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we'll meet with you guys on Monday, and you can we can talk it through a little bit, and we can also just talk one-on-one with organizations as they're trying to figure out what to apply for.
Great. And your contact information is in the chat?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, so it has my email address and my office number in there.
Perfect. Thank you.
So feel free to please email me and call, and I'll send the link, and we'll have just a good old time.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much, Dan, for coming. And I hope you will come back in the future for future meetings.
I will.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Christine so we can talk about the Army Corps and seawalls.
Okay. So hopefully you all were at the February full, we're in March, the last full board meeting in February, when the U.S. Army Corps presented in a very general way their region-wide study and draft plan for resiliency and protection against basically storm surge and increasing levels of danger based on how they also factor in sea level rise as a factor in this. But just to emphasize, the Army Corps' mandate is to protect and recommend changes to waterways, so that their study, while it references resiliency issues on land, they are not the ones that would be building that in this, and it would be up to the city and state to be taking measures further inland to coordinate. And the deadline for comments on this study is March 7th, which is just a couple of days from now. There's a lot of very technical stuff in their draft report. This community board was not contacted very early on in the process. In fact, I would say we learned about it kind of at the last minute. And in the last couple of weeks, there's been this huge flurry of different groups meeting, and the Army Corps has been to, meeting after meeting of various advocacy groups and community boards. There are some I've learned a lot, having started by knowing next to nothing. I am being kind of appalled that this community board hadn't been pulled in earlier. I realize now that, I think really a lot of the more legwork has been done by some of the advocacy groups. And specifically, there's an advocacy group related to the proposal for that affects our immediate area. That is to say, what they want, these floodgates that they want to install at the mouth of Newtown Creek and related barriers and treatments of the shoreline to the north and the south. The Newtown Creek Alliance has looked at it very in a lot of detail, and then it turns out that there is a coalition, essentially. I'm looking in my notes here, of 10 groups that that cover the different tributary waterways that are being affected by this proposal for gates. And all of them have, I think, very reasonable. They produced a letter of comments that's quite detailed and expresses a lot of skepticism about the efficacy of these gates, which would be built at huge expense, and they feel might have as many negative effects as positive effects. So certainly, I think the land use, and then in addition to the presentation to the board, the land use committee discussed it, the environment committee discussed it. I'm not sure that we didn't get any specific recommendations from the transportation committee, but I know that Sheila and Tom have been brought into the comments and I believe are sort of comfortable with the comments that have been come up. In addition, Tom's group, the Blissville Civic Association, also drafted a response specifically referencing Blissville and concerns about, which is a very vulnerable and underserved area that fronts Newtown Creek, not the shoreline of the East River, and has a lot of underlying environmental issues. So with the land use minutes, we distributed these draft bullet points, which had been through a couple of iterations, that we are suggesting be included in the CB2 response. There are 12 bullet points. I don't know if you want me at this point to go through them one by one, or if people have had a chance to look at it. How do you want to do this, Danielle?
Has everyone had a chance to look? Has anyone not had a chance to look? Christine, is there any way you can just paraphrase them? Because I know they're.
I'll try to summarize quickly. I guess the first point, and this really came from Danielle as well, is that she attended some meetings of many community boards within Queens and noted that some of the other boards further out in Queens that front the Long Island Sound and haven't had as much attention to environmental issues as the East River communities, that they are very supportive of this study. And so we don't want to appear to totally oppose everything. So the first bullet point is that we appreciate the scope of the use of the study with regard to examining and reducing the list of risks of sea level rise and storm surge flooding across the region. So, and the Army Corps on one level is doing its job, and we want to appreciate them for that. And I think recently they've been really trying to communicate as well, although maybe they were quite late on that bandwagon. But we are in agreement, however, with Brooklyn Community Board 1, that's Greenpoint, that the comment period is too short and that ideally it should be extended for 12 months. So that's comment number 2. The third bullet is that we think that local engagement and input are essential to the creation of a viable, long-run workable plan with political and economic support. But, it doesn't seem feasible for the Army Corps to engage with the myriad local and regional stakeholder groups that have valid concerns. So we strongly recommend strongly urge the creation of task forces that would cover sub-districts. And so if there were a task force that represented Western Queens and the area around Newtown Creek, then hopefully all these groups could be kept abreast of what's happening, and it wouldn't be up to each individual group to try and ferret it out or, you know, come up with their own technical recommendations. Fourth, that we think they need to do a better job of coordinating their base data with the latest data being used by New York City and New York State agencies, and to coordinate their recommendations with the planning initiatives of those agencies. And that they need to examine and prevent unintended consequences or spillover effects of their proposed water-based measures on adjacent low-lying areas. This really has to do with what I started out by saying. The Army Corps' jurisdiction is kind of limited to their waterways, and even though I know they're trying to do a more comprehensive analysis, it does seem as though their recommendations don't fully analyze some of the potential inland effects of what they're recommending. So then further on, we just concur with the recommendations of this New York City and New Jersey Urban Tributaries Working Group. That's a group I was referring to before, of the 10 groups that cover the different bodies of water that feed the river and ocean. And so we concur with their letter, and we are concerned that the Army Corps study has an over-reliance on in-water barriers. That would be these gates at the mouths of the tributaries, and that they haven't adequately considered other more natural or nature-based features, which might be a more natural way to protect the environment without the huge expense of these water barriers, which are, although they show examples of similar barriers, I guess in Europe and maybe down in New Orleans, we feel that what they're proposing is very untried in this area. So we have specific concerns about Newtown Creek in relation to the contamination in Newtown Creek and how that might be affected by these gates. And we feel that we concur with the recommendation that an alternative to the proposed storm surge gates should be developed. What else? Also, that the measures they're proposing along the shoreline, both in Greenpoint and Long Island City, when they show these very high walls, we don't think that we feel that that's unacceptable, as it would really be so much to the detriment to the park and the public access to the waterfront, both in terms of physical access and views. And also that any measures to protect the Long Island City waterfront will need to be coordinated with ongoing and expanding ferry service and ferry stops, as well as existing transit and vehicular tunnels under the East River. That they should look further along the Long Island City waterfront north of the Queensboro Bridge, which apparently they really didn't, or they don't show that in their study, to consider recommendations for additional low-lying areas, such as the area around Astoria houses. That they, again, another bullet point about coordinating with, that the Army Corps needs to coordinate more fully with New York City and New York State in their analyses and plans to achieve a resilient city. And that this came from the Environment Committee. Additional resources must be invested in green space and permeable surfaces throughout Community Board 2 to improve local flood resiliency, as well as investments in greenways, mass transit, and other low emission transportation options. So part of it is do everything you can to reduce the risk of flooding in general and to reduce the rate of global warming. And then we have a specific bullet to concur with the specific concerns of the Blissville Civic Association Now, you guys wrote a letter to Nydia Velasquez, but you're also going to write essentially the same letter to the Army Corps. Is that correct, Tom?
Yes, Christine, and if you wish, I can succinctly express the 4 points to the community board that concern us in Blissville.
Sure.
Thank you. So we share the concern with the storm gate, and the reason for that is threefold. Number one, the storm gate will harm the ecology of the creek. As I look back on the last 50 years, when I was a child, we used to say you could walk across the creek, it was so thick. And today we see fish swimming in it, waterfowl, and even dolphins coming to visit. And if you look at the Newtown Creek Alliance website, you will learn how these storm gates will affect ecology. Second is the Superfund designation. The only requirement is to clean up the area where the storm gate is going. There is no requirement that the rest of the creek be cleaned up. And that's going to be important as I share the final item. The final item is the storm gate will protect us from the East River water. However, we have CSOs that empty into the creek. We have storm water from the 11 miles of shoreline that empty into the creek. And the water treatment plant empties into the creek. This totals 1 billion gallons of water each year. What is it going to be like during a storm when the storm gates are closed, yet all that water is still pouring into the creek? So instead of drowning from the East River, we will drown from CSOs and the overflow of the water treatment plant. Now, they did say that they're going to install a pump, but no one has told me what size pump, what kind of capacity this pump is going to cause to move all the water that is pouring into the creek while the storm gate is closed. And what happens generally during a storm? Electric turns off. So there's all these questions and concerns. And my last item that we have concern over, the proposal contains 0 green infrastructure. We would like to see the water resilient green infrastructure of Hunters Point South continue down the shoreline of Newtown Creek, past Blissville, past Laurel Hill, West Maspeth, all the way to the borders of Brooklyn and Queens and Ridgewood. And those are the 4 points I want to mention, Christine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And the next bullet point, it also advocates not just in Blissville, but throughout for additional wetlands and graded shores. So in general, our comments are very much in favor of green infrastructure and what are being referred to as NBBFs or whatever. The natural approach to to trying to soft stormproofing rather than hard stormproofing. While I think the Army Corps' point is that, they feel that the most extreme event, soft proofing will not necessarily prevent flooding during the most extreme storm event. It does seem logical to want to prevent, every other event, all these other events that we're experiencing every couple of months in a more, in a more sustainable way. And lastly, that the Environment Committee of Queens CB2 is going to be developing a climate action plan over the next few months with local input, and that they're requesting that the Army Corps refer to and incorporate their recommendations throughout the planning process that's going to be going forward. So that was a lot. I don't know if there's any discussion or just a motion that this be accepted.
Steve, do we do the motion and get it seconded and then have discussion, or do we have discussion first?
Normally it's done as the best way, most efficient is to have a motion first.
Okay, is there anyone who would like to make a motion? Sheila?
Yes, I had my hand up to make the motion. I want to add a stipulation, but
go ahead.
But
Say
I'll wait for it to be seconded first.
Oh, yes, is that right, Steve? Sorry. You're on mute.
Can I make a motion with the stipulation?
Yes, make the motion that you're going to make, include the stipulation in your motion.
The stipulation is that they, I don't know how to say it properly, somebody can help. They discontinue the use of CSOs along the line, because that's one of the things that's in the plan is to move the CSO, and there had been a plan before to discontinue the use and to move away from that. So I wanted to add that stipulation.
Is there anyone who?
So you're asking that the Army Corps study incorporate the removal of CSOs, all CSOs.
Yes.
What they were going to move is just the outflow, or they were
Right,
proposing.
for the outflow, but it's like
The outflow of the Greenpoint plant, not the other CSO. There are CSOs on the Long Island, on our side, right?
I know.
Can you help us all? What is a CSO so we all understand?
Combined sewage overflow. And so about, I don't know how many years ago, there was push to deal with that, and they decided it was too expensive. But even I agree with Riverkeeper on this, and even they've made this comment over and over again on all the rezonings in the city and going up throughout the Northeast, that CSOs are one of the biggest environmental problems we have with our water. And so if we're going to be spending billions of dollars on kind of water resiliency, and I see Dan from Congressman Velasquez wants to comment on this, but I didn't word it properly, so I don't know, if somebody wants to take that.
Steve, can we let Dan's talk say something? Yeah. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Dan?
Well, yeah, so I don't mean to break the protocol. Army Corps should know better. I just wanted to point out that in the Water Resource Development Act, the Congresswoman has some green infrastructure authorizations for Army Corps, which actually can be part of the appropriations we asked for Army Corps to do some salt marsh with resiliency stuff in the creek. But also, interestingly, EPA and people who are involved in the Newtown Creek Superfund CAG know, that there are efforts by the city to reduce CSOs through building these huge tunnels to capture combined stormwater excess underneath the creek, kind of like overflow tanks that are very big. However, EPA didn't require the city to do more than what it was proposing, which wouldn't eliminate CSOs, but would reduce them significantly, but not more than 60-something%, right? So you still are going to have CSOs.
But there was the option to eliminate them, but the EPA decided not to go with it because they said it was too expensive.
Right.
I mean,
so the EPA didn't rule to force the city to do more than what it was proposing, like it did with Gowanus, which, by the way, in Gowanus, they didn't require them to reduce all, but had them do more than what they're proposing. And it got complicated because they were saying that the East River was more polluted than what was coming out of the CSO in terms of toxins. So they didn't feel like it was their jurisdiction, but it would be a Clean Water Act jurisdiction. In any event, it's still a CSO problem, even after the fix. And the Congresswoman's meeting, we did invite DEP to the meeting. I wanted Angela Cotta to come, but she wasn't available to speak to that. But I think that's a good follow-up for your environmental committee with DEP.
Thank you.
So to follow up on, thank you, Dan, to follow up on Sheila's comment, and I think it's a good one, is that we add an additional bullet to address reduction or elimination of CSOs.
Into the Newtown Creek, yeah.
Into Newtown Creek specifically, rather than, and not address whatever discharges directly into the East River.
It would be great to eliminate them too, if that, yeah.
I don't know to what, I feel like we need more expertise on this, because I don't know to what extent it's possible to even eliminate without
part of
redoing the entire sewer system of the city and where things lead. Because
yeah, my concern though is in their plan, they do have that they will move it, and that's expensive. And so why should we be supporting them moving it when we really want to get rid of it?
Yeah, Sheila, if I may, my understanding was the movement was allegedly they're considering, there's 3 items in terms of going into the creek. The movement was the water treatment plant discharge, which is, considerable. And then there's the CSOs. I didn't hear about CSO movement. I only heard about the possibility of them considering moving the water treatment discharge. The CSOs remain, as my understanding.
Tom,
I
that
didn't
was
heir
what I
about movement of
understood.
CSOs.
That's what I understood too, but it was a big plan, so I don't know. I might
Yes,
have
no, understood. And I did read through the plan again, so just it wasn't just from that. So it's I just would like to compliment Sheila's request. It's really, again, what I shared earlier, the 3 items: the CSOs, the water treatment discharge, and the 11 miles of shoreline, the watershed just flowing into the creek. Thank you.
What are we specific? We're asking them to move the CSOs out of Newtown Creek, or to put these tunnels so that they would tunnel the water out into the East River. Am I understanding that right?
Well, if I misunderstood, I thought I heard, and maybe I saw both Dan shaking his head, and I think Caroline had something that maybe I misunderstood in their plan, that part of it was the potential to move the CSO output from where it is, because I thought it was inside where the walls would be.
Yeah, so I think that would be, that's where the tunnels come in, right? It would be the use of those tunnels to move the output.
Yeah, Caroline, did you have more on this?
I was just going to say that they were moving the output to be from in front of the gate instead of behind the gate, because if you have it behind the gate closes and then it continues to flow into the creek.
Right. And again, that was just for the water treatment plant.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was
That's not the CSOs. There are, I don't even know, the 50 CSO discharges. They're talking about the one discharge from the water treatment plant, not all the CSO discharges that are throughout the creek.
Right, because they can't move those or eliminate them without reconstructing the entire sewer system.
Yes, and that goes to the point we heard earlier, which is that there was a plan to create, I think on the Nydia Velasquez's representative shared, a plan to create these tunnels or storage tanks under Newtown Creek, where the CSOs would be relocated to those tunnels. But that's not part of this plan either.
Well, we could reintroduce that if that's the most feasible way to protect the creek and reduce the pollution issues in the creek, which then, in the event of a storm surge or storm are going to sort of come inland, then I think we could request that be,
to me, it's a mitigating factor.
Sorry?
To me, that mitigates the storm gate. I think the bigger question is the storm gate necessary, or should we just create more green infrastructure to absorb the water?
Right. Well, we're already requesting that they reconsider, that they come up with an alternative to the storm gate. So, that seems to be everybody, a fairly widespread request on the part of all these pretty knowledgeable groups. So
So if I understand it correctly, Sheila has made a motion.
Yes.
And the motion was incorporating the points that Christine had mentioned, plus adding the point of getting rid of the CSO in that area. Is that correct?
That's correct, but no one has seconded that motion.
But that is the motion. Is there a second?
Well, the motion and with the amendments, because I got.
I gave it to you.
No,
Your
I know.
CSO.
Yeah, but the tunnels that were proposed that Congressman Velasquez has has in her water. Dan, you said it nicely if he was still here, but I just want to be clear. It's not necessarily getting rid of them, but that was my motion.
yeah, relocating or redirecting. How about that? Redirecting.
I would second relocating the CSO discharges from Newtown Creek.
Okay.
So that's the motion on the floor. There's a second, Tom, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let Dan reword that correctly so I don't mess it up.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on the motion? No one? Really?
And Wiley's back.
Laura has her hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people here put a lot into it. Our recommendations are solid. I like that we really amplify the Newtown Creek Alliance and the other tributary groups. And I think what's just important is that we stay engaged with the process going forward. Because this is over decades.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm for it.
Okay. I have to say on this one, I would like to do a voice vote. I know that we don't have to, but I think this is really important. I'd like it to be on the record, if that's okay, Debbie and Steve.
Of course.
So we have to call the question.
I'll move to call the question. I need a second.
Can I just ask, actually, I remember that there was somebody who asked if it could be backward in terms of like the starting from the opposite end of the alphabet. I just wanted to see if that was in here.
No problem. Technically, just before we do the roll call, we all have to say, all those in favor of calling the question, indicate by raising your hand. Are there any opposed to calling the question? I see no opposition. You can call the roll.
Okay. Debbie, is that you?
Oh, Anatol, do it backwards. I did.
Was it me or was that Debbie?
It can be you.
Wait, Debbie, you're on mute.
Sorry, Amparo Appleby,
Yes.
Deborah,
Anatol Asheroff.
Deborah, the chairman asked that the roll call be called in reverse. There's nothing that forbids that, so can we do it that way?
Mary Torres,
Is a yes in this situation?
Yes.
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 Hello Thomas,
Yes.
Chatasi is absent. Lauren Springer,
Yes.
Caroline Spitzer,
Yes.
Ryan Smith,
Yes.
Laura Shepherd,
Yes.
Roberto Saldana,
Yes.
Selena Romero is absent. Paula Perez is absent. Clara Oza,
Yes.
Riley Owens,
Yes.
Tom Matusitz,
Yes, thank you.
Kristen McGowan, absent. Patrick Martinez,
No.
Benjamin Lucas, absent. Sheila Lewandowski,
Yes.
Shemang Lama,
Yes.
Drun Khan,
Yes, sorry.
okay. Christina Hunter,
Yes.
Ben Gutman, you're still absent. Kenny Greenberg,
Yes.
Camille Gray,
Yes.
Dr. Roz,
I'm going to say nay, which in Greek means yes.
Thomas Gamir,
Yes.
and Garrett is absent. Maury Gallinoy,
Yes.
Lisa Dell is absent. Warren Davis,
Yes.
Craig is absent. Stephen Cooper,
Yes.
Osmond Chowdhury,
Yes.
Tanya Chavez,
Yes.
Danielle Brucker,
Yes.
Pat Bloomfield,
Yes.
Sandra Begishka
Yes.
is absent. Carisha, still absent. John Bahia,
Yes, yes.
Anatole,
Yes.
and Amparo Appleby.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries with 1 no.
Thank you all. So that will go out before the end of the comment period on the 7th. Right, Christine?
Yes.
Thank you all. Okay, okay, we're through land use committee, which was the bulk of it. But we do want to have very quick reports from the rest of our committees, starting with transportation.
I'll be super quick. Most of it's in the minutes. Please join us at our next meeting, which will be before the full board meeting next week, actually, next Tuesday, the 7th, I believe. Grateful to our new community members, public members who joined us. I see Stephen has a question, but I will add, we're trying to make a lot of Tom and I felt that a lot of years, senior citizens and the disabled have not been properly represented or not represented enough in a lot of what we've been discussing. So we are looking for more input to think of how to make sure to support the needs of the disabled and seniors in transportation issues. And some good things came up at we actually have a few disabled people, Roz. And that's the second time I think I felt that you've been kind of
Seniors? I'm sorry, I don't think so.
Yeah, actually we do.
And you could.
Wow, that was actually incredibly rude of you.
1643 out. We don't need 1643.
I think her question
Can
was
everybody who is
actually
not
about,
speaking go on mute, please? Thank you.
I think her question was actually about elderly, because I think there were 2 pieces. I just want to be clear about what Roz was, what were you referring to, Roz?
Oh, I just didn't feel that these groups were so represented on the committee itself, and these are protected classes, aren't they? So,
and do you think it's appropriate to interrupt my report right now by saying that? Or is that something that you would like to take up with the executive committee and then we can discuss it?
well, I did. And
we actually, our 2 public members we have some representation. That was some of what we were seeking in the public members, is to make sure we had more diverse representation when it came to senior citizens and the disabled. People with disabilities. Thank you, Amparo. Appreciate that. So may I continue? So, looking for folks to provide any input or feedback, to make sure that when we are looking at everything from making sure the snow is cleared in the intersection sometimes so people with walkers and wheelchairs can cross. So please, feel free to send your input. Thank you.
Steve, do you have a question?
Yeah, just one thing, Sheila. You know about my request to have the city come back and look at at Sunnyside Gardens to see whether there's any tweaks that could be had. Have we got any progress on them agreeing to come and take a look at?
We did bring it up at the meeting.
Yeah, I was out of the country though, so I couldn't attend. I'm sorry.
And I'd have to, look back. They did. We brought that up just to make sure that, and we were just trying to make sure we were exactly right on the location you were talking about. My recollection was it was that area of Queens Boulevard.
No, the specific location that I was concerning myself with is in my neighborhood, which is at 50th Street and 39th Avenue, where I took an informal poll and 1/3 of the drivers disobey the restrictions and turn the wrong way.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I really wanted a review of the entire area, not just the one location that I know of, to see whether there should be any tweaks. That's one I think there should be, but they may disagree. They had promised to come back and review it. And I'm wondering whether they could in fact do that.
Great. We will make sure we bring that up again on Tuesday.
Thank you.
And Tom, my co-chair, has something to add.
Thank you. And I'd just like to, Sheila, if I may, a special call out. At the Transportation Committee meeting this Tuesday, we will have a presentation from the Friends of the QNS. And so that is a proposed reestablishment of the Lower Montauk branch of the Long Island Railroad, reintroducing light rail to a transportation desert section of our community board as well as others, leading from Long Island City all the way out to Jamaica, with 3 stops in Community Board 2, Long Island City, Blissville, and Laurel Hill. Thank you. So please, anyone interested in learning more about the QNS, the rail line going across the Lower Montauk, please join us at our Transportation Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila and Tom. Okay, moving to engagement and inclusion, sorry.
The updates are just that to please join our next meeting on Wednesday 8 at 5:30 p.m. And then if you have any suggestions that you want the engagement and inclusion to support to each of your committees, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sorry. City services, was it Steve, did I do it?
Danielle, would you like to give a report on that? Because I
Sure.
failed to make that
It seems
meeting.
like it was so long ago. So we had a good city services meeting. We, I think we mostly approved, I honestly don't remember. We approved some liquor licenses and I think one parking like thing for taxis. It was a good meeting. We did not hear from the 108. We've actually asked them to come to speak at the full board meeting in April because I think they have been absent from transportation and city services, and we kind of have a lot of different questions for them. So hopefully they will join us in April. Maury.
Thanks. I just wanted to bring this up because when I was chair, Debbie and I were working on this, and we didn't. Cannabis Commission. I would love to see the Cannabis Commission.
So,
yeah, because they had the event with that online thing for community board members, and I went to one of them. What's that?
At very inconvenient times, but yes.
Very, very. They added one afterwards because it was like, how can working people come to this? But there was a guy that was presenting at this, and Caroline might remember his name. But he said that they are going to go do a quote unquote road show, and that if we're interested, we can reach out to him. But it would be great if either way we do it at a full board meeting or do a town hall meeting or something, because a lot of people are curious. I think the community wants to know, how's it going to affect, what's the difference between legal and not legal, licensed and not licensed or whatever. And then of course the biggest question is how maybe this is a joint with like small business. How does it affect? Because it's supposed to be like 50% of the licenses are supposed to go to local small businesses, not like big cannabis from out of state.
Yeah, so it is very important that we proceed with this and commit to the spirit of the way the law was written. So yes, I would like to do that. Maury, I might ask you if you would like to lead that, getting that here. I would think what would be ideal would be if they could come to the full board. And then I think it could be interesting if we could do a joint town hall with some of our local electeds on it, because I do think there's a lot of interest here. Can I task you you're heading that?
Well, I'm happy to, and I know that Assembly Member Ardea, he's now on the like 2 possibly relevant committees.
That's great.
So, all right, I'll reach out.
And his office is right across the street practically from an illegal one. So. The only thing I would add to Danielle's report is, again, this was not part of the committee, but we're trying to get there somehow. I understand that the 108 Precinct Council met, I was at last night or the night before, and it was brought up about the increase of crime in my neighborhood. I don't know if there's anybody who was at the meeting who could tell the community board if anything was accomplished. No? Okay. I will follow it up and try to find out for myself so I can let you guys know.
Tanya?
So back to your point about the cannabis and that session that we couldn't attend. Debbie reached out to Timothy, the person who gave the chat, because we wanted them to we invite him to the Engagement and Inclusion Committee. Unfortunately, we have not had a response yet on that. So we're waiting for him to come and chat with our community board and tell us more about all these legal process that we should be aware of.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move to Health and Human Services and Education.
Okay, at our February meeting, we had a presentation from Sunnyside Community Services about their new elder justice program to help seniors who identify with elder abuse. So they talked about the services they offer to people affected as well as to the community. Plan is for them to give a full presentation to the full board at some point. And for our upcoming meeting scheduled for March 13, we're supposed to have a presentation about this health equity and access to care project that's run by our under CUNY School of Public Health. So encourage everybody to attend. That's it.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, moving to arts and culture.
Teresa asked me to speak on that. So,
That's what I was going to ask.
right. So, we had the Sculpture Center came and spoke to us, and a couple of the key points are that entry is free to all. They have open calls and commission projects for which they receive about 900 entries a year. And they wanted to mention that there's going to be a book sale in mid-March. And on May 10th, there'll be a public exhibition that will include the artists speaking to the public. We also had Black Village Arts, whose mission is making arts education more affordable and accessible for Black and Brown youth. And they're based in Jamaica, but they've held over 100 workshops and events throughout all of Queens and Brooklyn. And then we had Sharona Silva from the Queens Public Library Woodside, who runs arts programs on Fridays between 3 and 6 p.m. for children and teens. And they are inviting artists who want to teach programs there. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenny. Okay. Laura, Environment, Parks and Recreation. I know this was your first meeting as chair.
Yeah, thanks to everyone for coming. We had a nice discussion, of course, about the Army Corps proposal, and we added some recommendations. And then we had kind of a general discussion about agendas for the upcoming year, the climate action plan we want to put together, and then just some general park and green space needs throughout Community Board 2, especially with regards to cooling and access to pools and swim instruction in the hotter months of the year. But yeah, so next month, March 23rd, will be a lot more focused on the climate action plan. Also, I just want to note, Queens Solid Waste Advisory Board met again, discussed disadvantaged communities, its own bylaws. If anybody is interested in attending those meetings on behalf of the board, let me know. And again, compost resumes March 27th. Yay.
Yay. Tom, do you have a question for Laura?
I do, thank you. Laura, is there any update? I had sent in on behalf of Blissville Civic, request for follow-up on the DEP pumping station that was presented over a year ago. And I understand the Environment Committee made several recommendations, and it appears that none of those recommendations were accepted, specifically around green infrastructure. I think it's absurd that a Department of Environmental Protection building has zero green infrastructure included in it. Can we talk about that?
Yes, we did discuss it. It was more or less just a recap of the discussion we had a year ago, and we definitely want to follow up with DEP about that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Of course.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Tom. Okay. So I know small business and tech was one combined meeting. So I don't know who wants to speak, but.
Well, I'll talk to the small business portion, and I'll let Anatol talk to the tech portion, okay. Which is simply enough. We've continued our discussion on creating a directory that's meant to basically serve local small businesses and services, and we've really just been talking about the nuts and bolts of how to go about that, and how we can best sort of align it with both the needs of small businesses and local residents as well. So and we're starting to really get a little deeper into the meat of making a request to the city tech department to actually get this going. Take it away, Anatole.
Yeah, thanks. Yep. Thanks, Kenny. Definitely more to come. And the other things we discussed was following up from a previous tech meeting with Clayton Banks, the CEO of Silicon Harlem, who offered to have to sponsor a tech meetup in the tech and small business meetup in the district. So that'll be a triple committee led project with engagement inclusion also joining in. And we're another long-term thing, well, not too long, that we're working on is on the tech side is a list of community-facing tech updates that we potentially make, like things like sharing more on social or a process for that, and a couple of little quality of life things for the make with our technology. Next tech committee meeting is March 28th. And when is the next small business meeting? Any?
Same day, but an hour before at 5
All
o'clock.
right, yeah. And both.
Thank you. That is everything. Before we adjourn, I just want to remind everybody that we are marching in the parade in St. Pat's for All on Sunday. If you would like to join us, please meet at Lou Lavdati at 11:45, 11:50, and we will march together. I hope you can join us. Does
I'd
anyone?
like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
I second it.
Anyone opposed? Okay, great. Thank you all.